just kind of like want to shine a spotlight on people that I know that should be recognized more for things that, you know, they're passionate about and stuff like that. So obviously we had to hit up Ant first, see what's going on with my boy Ant. It's been a while. If you've been like a long time listener of Between Villains, then you've definitely seen Ant on some of our earlier podcasts and stuff. I'm gonna let Ant actually introduce himself. He is like super into comic books, art, everything like that. So Ant, let us know what you're into, what's going on with you, what you've been up to lately, and yeah, man, who's Ant? Who is Ant? Let the people know.
Long time listener, not the first time caller. Been on Between Villains, been a minute because it's been pretty busy. You already know, name's Ant. I am an illustrator. I am a musician, primarily a bass player in my band Paper Champs. I also write comic book reviews. I have like a separate Instagram page called The Comic Surfer, but I write primarily for Fanboy Factor. And yeah, man, I dabble in different kinds of things, comic books, music, illustration, think pieces and stuff like that. That's pretty much that. And been getting the game. Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, my brother. I've seen you gaining on the media. I'm like, nah, this guy's inspiring me to get in the gym, get ripped up.
I'm just trying to get in my singing flow, And also shout out to other Villain West, you know what I mean? Because these tats, man, like they just.
I'm not gonna lie, Wes has been on the move this summer. I'm trying to get him to be episode 2 of Heroes for sure. I need him on because you two are probably like the first 2 people I think of when I think of like friends that I have in real life that are actually like talented and like really have a passion for shit that I'm into and stuff like that. So you and Wes definitely right above my list. I wanted to ask you, Ant, out of all of your interests as far as like music, comic book illustrations, reading comic books, everything like that, what are you most passionate about? What would you say?
Damn, it's a simple but kind of actually complicated question. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I think in recent years, and I mean, I don't want to go too long with it, right? But I think contextually, ever since 2020, and I think 2021 when like Kentaro Miura, apologies if I mispronounce his last name wrong,
the Berserk.
Yeah, he passed away, and like hearing what was the causes of his death and stuff like that, and I couldn't help but wonder, like, man, like this man never really got a break. You know what I mean? Like he was making great stuff for us, but he had very little time for himself and stuff like that, and it made me really reevaluate, what I enjoy doing, but to what risk, right? And so it's kind of why I've been also working out too and stuff like that. Not just these muscles, of course.
Yeah, like, show them guns off. Show them guns off. We at the gun show.
Yeah, look at that. I'm on my Hugh Jackman flow. But one of the biggest muscles is here and here, right? And like you can't make things that you want if you're dead, right? And so I think that had me really reevaluate like what is it that I really love doing, and I think also in light of like Hollywood and writer's strike and all this other stuff, it starts to make you wonder, like you see all these fields, especially the creative fields, and it's like people love to consume it, but they don't really love to show love for it or appreciate it, or at least even show respect and paying creatives for the hard work that they do. So that being said, in context, right, it's just that a lot of those things made me really, really evaluate like how I wanted to approach my art. So I kind of go wherever the wind takes me, in a sense. It's like I'm always refining my craft in like illustration and music, but I'm not really a stickler for either or. It's just kind of like whatever kind of gets me closer to whatever, and then everything else as a byproduct will follow suit after it. So if music takes me a little further to some place that helps me shine more attention onto illustration or comic book reviews, cool. Or if comic book reviews does the same thing, vice versa, I don't see it as like a monolith. I kind of just see it as like, multifaceted.
I like
so
that.
Whichever I feel like, you know what I mean? Because, we all have moods, and some days we have our best days, some days we have our worst days, but like whatever keeps us anchored, that's what matters most. And, they all fall under the umbrella of art. So it's kind of like the same thing with working out. You know what I mean? It's like, whether it's a dumbbell, a kettlebell, or calisthenics, it doesn't matter. It's a workout. So as long as you get the workout in, that's all that matters. So art is art. It's either or.
Absolutely, I fucking agree. That was a fucking awesome shit, and I don't even know what to say. No, I fucking yeah.
That was a simple question, but even with simplicity,
But
there's some complexity in it.
yeah, exactly. It's really up to you. You can answer it as simple or as as complex as you want to. And I think it's interesting that you say that you kind of go with the flow. More so, it sounds like freedom to me. More so, as far as like with your passion and stuff like that. It's kind of like I often have issues with like juggling everything that I'm into, as far as like playing basketball, video games, podcasting, things like that, and I get caught up a lot, and like it often makes me unhappy when I feel like I can't do all the things that I want to do, instead of just focusing on what's gonna make me happiest at the moment. So it sounds like you found a way to like really express freedom as far as like being an artist and stuff like that. So I'm out of it, and I'm gonna go back, rewatch this episode, and I'm gonna really
I want to what you were saying there, because I've definitely had a lot of that over the years, even ever since I was a kid. I remember primarily middle school to high school. I had my old teacher, social studies teacher, Miss Delaney. Shout out to Miss Delaney. I remember it was a period in time where I was struggling between, do I want to be a musician or do I want to be a comic book illustrator? And I really wasn't quite sure, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't really know. I felt like I was kind of getting boxed in. And then I remember she had told me, well, why don't you put one of those things down and just see which one you want to go further with? And if you feel like that's the thing you want to go in, then keep going in that direction. But if you feel like that direction isn't quite where you wanted to be, or as much as you thought it would be, then put that down and do this. But then I got to that point where I was like, and this is kind of a thing with us as people of color, right? Like, again, it's the monolith factor. It's like you're not black if you like, I don't know, rock or metal, or you're not black if you're like this. You're not, and it's like, who cares, right? Like, who says that I gotta be one thing? I don't have to be one thing, and I shouldn't be one thing, right? And when you think about all these, people that everyone always goes crazy about, right? Like, certain actors or other figures. You realize that they're not just one thing, that they're mother, father, brother, sister, you know what I mean? Like,
and I feel like that's such an old way of thinking, like to put yourself in a box, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
As far as like being like a artist, you know what I mean? Like I would.
You're not just a podcaster.
Exactly,
You're
and
also play basketball.
we could look at Between Villains as like an example. Like, it's a platform, but it's not just a platform for only news, and it's not just a platform for only gameplay clips. It's not just a platform, like, it's like, and that's kind of like the approach that I've tried to take with Between Villains and stuff like that. Like, I want it to be a bunch of different things that fall under the same umbrella, as opposed to just being one thing. You know what I mean? Because some days I wake up and I don't want to review a game. Maybe I want to just play a game and just have people watch, or maybe I want to talk about a game and I don't feel like playing the most competitive. You know what I mean? It's just all about not putting yourself in a box, and definitely choosing what makes you happy. And it goes back to like just creative freedom and stuff like that, and just doing what makes you happy as an artist. So yeah, I really admire. That's awesome. I'm definitely gonna try to approach like how I work in that same like aspect and stuff like that. That's fucking dope.
And I just want to say one last follow up before.
Nah. So go off.
I think it's the most important thing, right? Is you do what makes you genuinely happy with whatever it is that makes you happy in that moment in time, and that's like the most important thing, because a lot of people suffer burnout. And I know burnout all too well, and when you get to a point where you feel like that thing that you once found joy in no longer is enjoyable, you shouldn't get to that point to burnout, right? Like, that should give you a moment to pause and reevaluate, like, why do I feel like there's so much pressure with this thing that I love, right? If I love this thing that much, I shouldn't actually feel that kind of pressure at all. So if I do feel pressure, then that means let me just take a step back and really reevaluate, and then figure out what is the why,
right? And
then ask myself, is the why enough for me to endure this, or to just take a break from it? You know what I mean? And you don't want something that you love to rob you of joy. If it's robbing you of joy, then it's not something you should be dabbling like that.
Exactly. You should definitely give it a break. And you could apply the same mindset to like when you play a fighting game. When you hit your head in a fighting game multiple times, it gets frustrating to the point that it's not fun to play anymore. But you give it a break, you come back to it, you approach it with like a new mindset or a new thought process. You know what I mean? And you try to find that joy again, and then you want to play in better and stuff like that. So it's always about, like you say, and it always goes back to like finding that joy being free, being happy and stuff like that. So yeah, I agree, man. That's a dope way to approach like your work and stuff like that. It's fucking awesome.
That was a good question.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, right. So that was for the podcast. So let's get into the nerd shit. And let's get into the awesome nerd shit that the villains want to hear.
Yeah.
These people want to hear some fucking nerdery. So, and let's start it off. I asked you for about a month now. My PC's been in and out of life support. My shit has been dying. It's on the fritz. Might have to get a new one soon, see what's going on. But now that I have you here, let's go over your top 5 video game list of all time. So it doesn't have to be in a specific order unless you put it in the order already. But I want to know, your top 5 video games and why those video games like stick out to you, why they resonate with you, what makes them special to you, and things like that. So go off.
Okay. Well, I had it ready just in case. So, in no specific order. Oh, I will say this though. This is not on my list, but I just want to say it because the only 2 games that I've been looking forward to and that I'm very excited about, and I don't really own like a PS5, but like Street Fighter 6, played it. I love that game to death. That's because I love Street Fighter, and I think that that's probably the best game since Third Strike and Alpha 3.
Man.
And aside from Marvel's Capcom 2. But aside from that, and Spider-Man 2 hasn't come out yet, but I feel like that game is going to be something as special as the first one. So, and I'm hoping it is.
Yeah, it looks that way. It looks like they're setting it up to definitely be like the successor that we all want, for sure.
Right. So now for my list of my 5. So we got X-Men Legends. X-Men Legends.
Is that 1 or 2 or just like both, like the franchise in general?
Both.
Okay.
Both.
I like that answer.
But I will say this though. Both, and they're gonna be 1. But the reason why I feel like they're both 2 parts of a whole.
Absolutely.
And the reason why I say that is because I think, first of all, I love the first game a lot because that game is actually really long. Like the first game is actually long as hell.
Yeah,
like,
it is. It is.
And I always like the way when you get XP points and when you get certain items to unlock certain things. I feel like for me it was a lot more challenging and a lot more harder of a game than I would say Marvel Ultra Alliance 1.
Yeah, absolutely, bro. I remember there was like those trials in the Danger Room in X-Men Legends that the Danger Room trials versus the trials that were in Ultimate Alliance, night and day.
Yeah.
Night and day.
And also, it is I think X-Men Legends was the first RPG game that like I really was that into, and of course, because I grew up on comics. I mean, the first comics I ever had was X-Men, Batman, and Justice League. So I have a big, huge.
That's good lineup. That's good lineup right there.
Yeah.
That's good lineup.
X-Men. I mean, I got Batman here. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't got symbol on me, but that's already like the thing there, right? So yes, X-Men Legends. I love the first game a lot. I even loved when you get find the little comic books. You find that I'm a sucker for that.
Yep.
And so X-Men Legends 2, why I like it is because the multiplayer.
Oh
is
man,
beautiful.
Yes, it is.
Multiplayer is beautiful. I remember that was one of the first few multiplayer online games that I actually played when they had the online feature at the time.
Yeah.
And also the roster. The roster was amazing. You know what I'm saying?
Roster was impeccable.
But I feel like the quality in terms of between the 2 games, I feel like X-Men Legends 1 still had better quality than X-Men Legends 2, though. You know what I mean? So, 1, X-Men Legends 1 and X-Men Legends 2. Now and also, the classic modes, when you play those flashback missions and they actually added to the story,
yeah.
and then, putting through different periods of X-Men history, I was like, yo, you had me right there. You know what I'm saying?
Like the shit with Bishop, the shit with Bishop and shit like that, that was awesome. And I even like the it's so crazy because growing up now is the mutant scene in Marvel Comics is so much different than it was to where it is now. So now all the mutants are kind of this allied force. Everybody's kind of like an X-Men now. As to where back in the day you had more so of a divide between the Brotherhood, the X-Men, and I think the first mission of X-Men Legends is you fighting the Blob, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
I think you fight a couple people. Yeah, a couple people. Yeah. And that shit was fucking the way they wrote the Brotherhood in that game was very accurate. If I'm not bugging, I think was Avalanche in the game too. Yeah, they had a couple people, right? Yeah,
Avalanche was in the game.
Yeah, they had a couple
I was
people.
in the game. They had a lot of stuff in that first game in particular. That first game was jam packed, and then
they went crazy with part 2. They added in Deadpool, obviously. that you had to
Iron Man.
unlock. And then the Iron Man nodes, you have to find all of them, and then you unlock Iron Man, which kind of set up, if we want to talk about the Ultimate Alliance.
It did.
That definitely did.
People, I feel like it's weird, because just like in this day and age where it's like, nowadays you got a lot of people who found out that the Dragon Ball Z movies actually had metal soundtracks in the US dubs, right?
Yeah, right.
And it's to a point nowadays where people think that's AMVs. And it's like, no, the original
actually
movies
had that
English dubs before, like, they lost the licensing after a period of time, because licensing, I guess, must have went up and expired. And so when you look up the Dragon Ball Z movies now on whatever streaming source, the music is different. Like, they took out the metal music and they put in
shit,
just
is it?
Yeah. So like, people now think it's like, oh, it's like, oh, when you see these edits online on Instagram or whatever, it's like, oh, that's just AMV. And it's like, no, nigga, they did play Deftones. They actually played Deftones and Finger 11 and, you know, Always on the Bands. Like, they had that. So it's the same way where it's like, people talk about Marvel's Alliance a lot, but they forget without Extra Legends 1 and 2, because those two games, I always consider that like the Trinity. Like, it's Extra Legends 1, 2, and then Marvel's Alliance. Because I think after
Ultimate Alliance
Ravensoft,
2, Ultimate Alliance 2 was trash.
yeah,
I hate
like,
people that say that game was fire, and I'm like, bro, did you play Legends and Ultimate and UA1?
And I mean, and it's still not to throw crap on like the developers that worked on that game. I know they worked hard on it.
Yeah, they
but
did. It was
truth be
good.
told, it's just that like the gameplay, the designs of the characters, they look like Play-Doh. It was
And
like,
this-
yo, what's going on here?
And the Civil War storyline, I feel like negatively affected the gameplay, whereas it kind of divided some of the characters. And it's like, no, Ultimate Alliance is it's literally called Ultimate Alliance, like, because I
Right.
want to fucking party up everybody. Like, I don't want to have to pick and choose and worry about, you know what I mean?
Right.
So,
Mhm.
so
And
like
plus, we
that's
never
kind of where
had
they
that
lost me.
Galactus battle. And
The
we never had that
oh
Galactus
my
battle, you know what I'm saying?
God.
Like after the end of the first game, and I think all those ramifications, like, you know, when you would accomplish like whatever feat you needed to, like prevent this person from dying or this and this, and they actually showed you like these were actual consequences. I was like, oh, the second game will be coming out, and I was thinking, oh, the second game is gonna follow up and Galactus gonna be the main villain,
Right.
And then nope, the
Nope.
Civil War. And I was
Civil
like,
War.
this is trash.
Some
You know what I
bullshit.
mean? And
Yep.
don't get me wrong, it's still fun to play with people, just, you know, for fun. But that game was not the game that I think people really wanted, like hardcore, like actual Marvel comic fans that actually played the first game and actually love comics was like, yeah, this is the thing I want to play. Because to be told, Civil War, cool as it was cool for its time. In
Absolutely.
a post-9/11
Say it
world.
one more time.
Yeah,
It was cool for its time. Yes,
In a
man.
post 9/11 world, and remember, like, that was at the time back when comic books, like, yeah, they were starting to get more mainstream, and the comic book movie boom was kind of bubbling. But nobody was really reading comics. There was a lot of people that was kind of out of comics. So Civil War was one of those few like comic events that brought people back. Into
Yeah,
comics.
absolutely.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Especially with Marvel, you know what I mean? So
And then the
there's
whole
that,
shit
but,
with Spider-Man's fucking, you know what they did.
Yeah,
You know what
yeah,
they
with
did.
the spider armor.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
And oh man, 2007.
The
It was a
reveal.
beautiful and rough.
Yeah.
Because it was like, you get the spider armor, and then one more did. No fault to J. Michael Straczynski, because that wasn't his fault.
Right.
Joe Quesada, I love the illustrator, hated that editorial decision. But you know what? That's null and void for this conversation.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'll keep it moving.
And just to add one more thing on to the whole Ultimate Alliance, X-Men Legends shit. Those games are so legendary that till this day, since we haven't really gotten a live action Galactus anything, you know, they did the bullshit in the Fantastic Four movie with the cloud of smoke Galactus. To this day, when YouTubers and other people talk about Galactus and they make like videos, they still use the clip from Ultimate Alliance in that fucking video when they talk about Galactus. That's how fucking amazing that cutscene was.
Yo, and look, I gotta add this in now that we're talking about it, because
Add it in, baby.
character model designs in Marvel's Alliance 1, and you can tell because again they pulled a lot of it, because I feel like Extra Legends 1 still great game, but where they started to find their stride and how it led into Marvel's Alliance 1 was when you saw how they perfected the character designs in Extra Legends 2.
Right.
Because the CGI models were beautiful. And then that really translated really well into Ultimate Alliance 1, where you start to see how they took the design of those models, and then they were like, all right, let's just bring the other Marvel characters aside from X-Men into that kind of aesthetic. And it just, it's crazy, because there's another thing too in context. That was 2006, and I remember this, because I was like 12 years old.
Right.
So Marvel's Alliance 1 introduced Deadpool into the game for those that never played X-Men Legends 2. I remember so many people becoming a Deadpool fan because of that game.
Right, and he had the teleport ability. So people would
And it was like,
people use them all the time.
yeah, and it was like, you wanted Spider-Man, but you couldn't play a Spider-Man. You
Exactly.
got him. You want Wolverine, but you can't play Wolverine. You got him. And,
Exactly.
you know, and also he was a funny character. So
yeah, he used to talk his shit too. He used to talk a lot of shit. Why when you played this?
Yeah.
Talk a lot of shit.
Yep. So yeah, so that's the Legends 1 and 2.
I like that.
Then,
starting off strong.
Yeah, and then the second game, Spider-Man for PlayStation 1.
I see you talk about this game a lot, Anfe. You love this game. You love this fucking game.
Hey, look, I have so many fond memories of that game. I still remember the passwords for that game. Yo, next, Stanley backwards, unlocks everything. I mean, hit mode. Like, you know what's crazy? I've seen all these YouTubers talk about Across the Spider-Verse, right? And they're talking about all these Easter eggs. But not one freaking YouTuber had ever acknowledged in that scene. Like, they acknowledge the, oh, hello, Peter part, right? You know, when Spider-Man's going through that little, like, training facility with those holograms of the villains. But they don't know that little training facility from the PlayStation 1 Spider-Man game when you're practicing your targeting practice. Like,
oh, shit. I didn't know either. You just put me on.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, like,
holy
when you go
shit.
in the training mode, go to training mode in Spider-Man PlayStation 1, right? You go to training mode. And
are we not talking about the movie one, right?
No, we're talking about,
we're talking about
the game.
When you
movie,
yeah.
Yeah, but the movie has a sequence, you know, when Miles is running away from all the spider people, right? And there's a sequence, and you even see it in the trailer, but it is a sequence when he's running and you see these like holograms pop up, and it's like Doc Ock's popping up.
They all look like the ones from the animated villains. Yeah.
That sequence is literally from the training mode sequence where you're practically targeting with the web shooter.
Holy shit! That's fire. I had no idea.
Look it up. I'll even send you. I'll look for it. I'll even send you what I actually put a cropped image together of that little like still frame, and then of that training mode sequence in Spider-Man for PlayStation 1. Aside from that, it was the first 3D Spider-Man game ever. And they got so many things right with that game in terms of the characters, in terms of just the kind of world, like a pre-MCU world where it was like...
it wasn't scared to be a comic book, like a comic book game.
And it reflected the comics of the time where, you know, like nowadays it's weird because I think every time Marvel depicts Spider-Man, they always just focus on him in his teen years when like in the comics Spider-Man's an adult now. Like he's been an adult for like 30 years now.
He's been an adult my whole life.
Yeah,
he's only a kid in flashbacks now.
Right, you know what I'm saying? Like for our parents and grandparents, you know, he was a teenager for a period of time and then a young adult. But for us growing up, you know, 90s kids growing up, like we knew him already as an adult, married Mary Jane, all this stuff before, you know, that One More Day book.
Teaching a little bit, and some canons teaching, like being a fucking teacher at schools and shit like that. Like, I've been waiting for like Peter to grow up in the movies for so long now. It's like I like the origins and shit, but I'm ready for Peter to like be Peter, like, you know. Yeah.
That's why there's a bit of an appeal to some degree with the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies, because it's like they just focused on the tail end of high school and then went straight into like young adulthood.
Right.
Although I will say Andrew Garfield, I think, is the perfect like Spider-Man.
Garfield's goated.
But I think the Raimi films did a good job at least highlighting like a mature Peter Parker.
I think the Raimi movies. I think the Raimi. Before we get too off track and shit, I think the Raimi movies are just better movies. Like overall, like the overall movie, like as far as like having like a concise villain and shit like that. Because let's be honest, our Raimi villains are smacking the Mark Webb villains. Like we got Norman Reedus and we got fucking Alfred Molina as Otto Octavius. So you know, just that alone.
Look, I'll even add this, and it's gonna be controversial, but I think people have started to come around about Spider-Man 3.
The greatest fucking movie. I love that fucking movie.
Yo, Spider-Man 3 is actually not that bad of a movie. Like, I think it was just at the time we just wasn't ready for a movie like that. I'm not saying that movie was perfect, but I will say there's a lot of heart in that movie. And yo, there was consequences. Like, Peter and MJ just don't get back together like it's all honky-dory. Like, they have to repair their relationship, and at the end, you're not sure if they really are, like, gonna be back together. It's just more like they reconcile the differences, and they gotta start back from ground one. And I feel like, or ground zero. But I feel like that right there, there's such a maturity to it, especially, like, learning to be wary of like your inner dragon or the two wolves you feed kind of thing, where it's like be careful with the wolves you feed, like, you know, because one of them might lead you to a darker path kind of thing. And I think Spider-Man 3 actually did a good job. And also Venom, again, it's gonna be controversial, but I say like Venom was not that bad in that movie.
Bro,
Like he looks so real.
For the Venom that we got right now, it's not. He's like our current Eddie Brock isn't that much better than the Topher Grace Eddie Brock. Like it's not that much. Like it's not like obviously CGI and shit like that. We've come a long way as far, but like acting and shit like that, like it's not that much different or better than, you know, the shit that we had. It's a little bit more goofy in the Raimi movies, of course. But if you go back, we look at Sandman. Sandman was a very tragic character. You know, like. And the fact that Peter let him go at the end, like that shit doesn't even get resolved. He's like, they just have like this standoff. He leaves. He's like, yo, bro, I gotta go fucking see my daughter, bro. I'm out. Peace. Shit is getting crazy. I'm out of here.
Yeah, it's crazy, and it's not to be a full-on tangent, but there's a reason why, again, I'm gonna bring this game up, is because that the Raimi trilogy really focused a lot on empathy and forgiveness. I feel like the MCU movies have been lacking that. Like, I think they've been lacking stakes and depth to a degree where it's just like, yo, like, we forget these are supposed to be characters. They're not action figures. They're supposed to be characters. And I think that's kind of been lost a little bit with some of the with the latest phase of MCU films. I would say Guardians 3, I enjoyed that movie a lot. And of the recent MCU films of this phase so far, Guardians 3 I think is like the best thing, other than like...
Shang-Chi was good.
Yeah, Shang-Chi was alright, you know what I mean? Yeah. No Way Home, I feel like that movie really starts when Spider-Man show up.
I don't know how.
And it's like, look, like I still got love for that movie, right? But it's one of those things where you start to realize, like, even in that movie, Tom Holland's Spider-Man is still getting help. Instead of fighting his own battle.
He's fucking getting carried.
Yeah, and you know, and that's not, and I don't want to, you know, trash Tom Holland, because that's no fault to him, right? That's the screenwriter.
Yeah, the writers and shit, of course.
Yeah. And I mean, and even then, in context of the MCU, right, he's supposed to be different from all the other Spider-Men. So, you know, I give it that, you know what I mean? But in terms of like that desire of a Spider-Man that actually struggled, but is resilient on his own, that's why when I go back to PS1 Spider-Man, what I love about that game is it highlights like Spider-Man is not just intelligent, he's very resilient, has a great sense of humor, but also knows when to get serious when it's time to get serious. And in that game, I think that and also Rino Romano, underrated as the voice of Spider-Man. You know, people forget that he voiced Spider-Man in Spider-Man Unlimited.
Oh shit, Unlimited.
Yeah, and he also
and Unlimited. He was in the movie, right? He was in Across the Spider-Verse.
Yeah, Spider-Man Unlimited was in it, but Rino Romano didn't voice him. Like, he didn't have a line. So
okay.
Like, oh,
no dialogue.
But I hope that he does get something in the next movie, though, because I feel like, yo, like, Rino Romano's Spider-Man is so iconic in that PlayStation 1 game that people forget that, like, he was that. You know what I mean?
Right.
And as much as I love Daniel Barnes from the 90s Spider-Man cartoon, I'm glad that they picked Rino Romano for that game, because they had a whole cast from the 90s Spider-Man cartoon.
They could have pulled from.
Yeah, and I mean, that game felt like a nice carryover from the 90s cartoon. So there's that. Also, just a pre-MCU world. It felt very true to the comics of that time. And I mean, yeah, it was the first Spider-Man game, and it's crazy how so much of the game mechanics carried over into the Spider-Man movie games.
Right.
And to this day, they still pull a lot from that game. Also, another fun fact, the amount of costumes you got in that first game, when you collect those costumes, if not for that game, no game such as the Amazing Spider-Man game, the Arkham franchise, or any other video games that came after would ever bother to do the whole unlockable costumes thing. Because that game was the first game to
set the tone. It really set the tone.
Yeah, it set the tone for that. Like, PS1 Spider-Man opened the door for the Arkham games to fly. And I think that, like, that's why that game's so special. And to this day, it's still fun to play. And Monster Ark, to this day, no one brings me that much anxiety than that game. That
Venom?
Yo, that Venom too. But Monster Ark, he was scary.
Oh, Monster, okay, copy.
You know what I'm saying? So, and mind you, that was one of the first 2 games also that I beat without a memory card.
Oh, one sitting. Holy
one
shit.
sitting, man. Struggled. When I beat that game,
the Jurassic days.
Did it feel great. You know
the prehistoric days.
Yeah, yo, the dark days. So moving forward, it's another one. It's connected to PS1 Spider-Man because it's made by the same developers, right? Activision and Neversoft. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3. Another game. Look, I love music, I love comics, And what I loved about the Pro Skater games, because it was made by the same developer, what was crazy is in Tony Pro Skater 2, you got Spider-Man and Darth Maul as unlockable character.
I remember this like yesterday, bro. Oh my god.
Mm-hmm. And in PlayStation 1 Spider-Man, when you're playing that chopper scene, when you're running away from the chopper after you beat Scorpion, there's a billboard, and he goes by it. It's Tony Pro Skater 2 billboard. And Spider-Man says, "Oh, hey, Tony Hawk, I skated with that guy once." And you're like, crazy.
Canon. Oh, so it's canon.
And I was like, doing that for the MCU, right? So then, on the other hand, also was this. But Pro Skater 3, what I loved was because the gameplay mechanics was great for that game. The game was super fun maps, and also, again, X-Men guy, right? So you got Darth Maul, and then you got Wolverine. I played the hell of that game with Wolverine doing ollies and flips and all kinds of stuff. And, listening to bands like AFI, KRS-One, Exhibit.
Music was fucking awesome, bro.
The music was great. Red Hot Chili Peppers. I mean, man, what's the name of this other band? It's like, I think CKY. I think it was Bitter something things. I can't remember. Alien Ant Farm with Wish. Like, the soundtrack was immaculate for that game, and I feel like it's funny now that nu metal has gotten this kind of revival, and even though the metal scene is weird, it's so niche, but I feel like nu metal has gotten this big appreciation now with people like, e-girls going crazy over Deftones and all this other stuff, and Slipknot, whatever. But on the other hand, it's also like, it's interesting with hip-hop, how it's become such a dominant genre, but yet it meshes so well with other genres that it incorporates into it, that I think a lot of kids, because skateboarding wasn't that popular back then like that, right? Like, not to where it is now. And the same thing with, I would say, with a lot of music. Like, back then, genres used to be just separate from each other, right? Like, you rarely had genres really be... Shout out to Linkin Park for trying to bridge that hip hop and, the alternative rap, right, the alternative shit. And I feel like Tony Pro Skater 3 was such a cultural touchstone because it incorporated different genres in a game. So you didn't care like what you was listening to as long as it slapped. Yeah, it was basically like a big homage to like pop culture. Yeah. Like everything that was popping at the time, it was just like, all right, we're gonna put that shit in the game. You're gonna fucking skate, and it's gonna be fucking fun, and it's meta. Yeah, and it's crazy that you mentioned it too, because again, it's reflective of pop culture for its time, and it's some of that stuff you can't really recreate. And I think some of that really does belong in that particular era. Like MTV back then used to actually mean something. And when you were on MTV, that meant like, oh crap, like that meant something. Now it's like there's so many streaming services. Who cares about MTV? MTV doesn't even play music like that anymore, right? So that's how you know that was a very big cultural touchstone for its time. So I think Tony Pro Skater 3 is very reflective of that. But also, it's a fun game. I enjoy playing it every now and then or whatever. I pop it on, and I feel like there hasn't been a lot of... There have been some cool skating games after that, like Underground 1 and 2. And, I loved Underground. You got American Wasteland. Yeah, and also look, if you don't know, Underground 1 and 2, I think it was Underground 1, you unlock Iron Man. Yeah, I remember that. And Boba Fett or something like that too. So it's like, Jango Fett, I think. Yeah, Jango Fett, because I remember Star Wars Episode 2 was around that time frame, so, timeline-wise, it would be Jango. Yeah, that's how you know. Dang, how old is this guy? I'm about to be 30 next year, so there you go. Same, brother, same. But I think that there's something in that, I think, in those games that I think is missing nowadays when it comes to just, like, games that are just fun and have replayability. And I feel like games don't really have that replayability factor as much. And, I get it. You got to go with the times and whatnot and, adapt, and everything's all battle royales. But I think it's why it's always beautiful when you get cool single-player games or games that has multiplayer, but you don't need to be online to have multiplayer. Or if you are, you'll have a platoon and play an actual story that you feel engaged with. I think some of those games are, for that reason, why I bring them up. Now, as I said, with story, right? See how I'm about to cohesive. I like it. All right, so weave it. It's fluid. You know it's fluid. It's fluid. Max Payne 2. Oh, shit. 2. Underrated as a game. Story-wise, Sam Blake was probably in that room on fire when he was writing that script. Literally, he's just sitting there. The whole fucking shit is just in flames and shit. On fire. People probably like, get out of there, Sam. What are you doing? Get out. he's like, Alan Wake ain't gonna come out until like a decade later.
And now he would,
But
and that was also gonna be some heat. Little did he know.
And, I mean, and those who play Alan Wake, if you really pay attention,
One of my
to a lot
favorites.
Of stuff, there's a lot of references to Max Payne.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, so that being said, Max Payne 2, I remember playing it. Vividly, I remember playing it back in 03, but I remember really playing it back in like 2008 or 2009. And I was like, yo, I never beat this game, and I really want to beat this game. And I didn't expect for that game to have so many twists and turns, let alone just the way the story unfolded. You know what I mean? Like, it starts off somewhere random in the middle of the game, and you're wondering, like, what's going on, what's happening, why am I in the hospital? And then you're playing the game backwards all the way up to present. But where that game takes you, it's like, you don't get to just see Max Payne's point of view of events. You get to see Mona Sachs' point of view of events. And then on top of that, you think, okay, this game doesn't have really much to do with the first game other than, Mona Sachs. You thought she was dead and turned out she wasn't. But then you find out, hey, Valkyrie, well, that drug, like, that started it all off. Like, that started off that whole thing with, dudes raiding into Max Payne's home and killing his wife. And, setting him on this path of revenge against, like, the people that made that drug and, or, doing all that stuff. You find out that dude, Vladimir Lem, that you helped out in the first game, was the man behind it all. And it was, like, such a crazy plot twist. When you realize, yo, I've been helping the very man that murdered my family. This guy's been smiling in my face.
Yeah,
and
that's
he
insane.
used me as,
That's
like,
insane.
his own hired gun. Like, that game is one of the best, like, true, like, crime drama games I've ever played in my life. And I think also the music, Poets of the Fall with Lake Goodbye. Again, when you beat that game, and you hear that song here and there, bits and pieces, like characters are humming in it, this and that. But when you beat that game and that credits start rolling,
you feel
like,
it?
damn.
Like, that was some shit right there. He was on fire. He was writing it, and he was on fire.
Like the gameplay, like the bullet time was A1
And
for
that,
its time.
the bullet.
The gameplay's funky now. You know what I'm saying?
I was gonna say that too. The bullet time shit with Max Payne, they kind of set the tone with that too, because a lot of games would come out later on down the line to like use that same mechanic. You had games like Stranglehold for the Xbox 360 that the whole bullet time slow down and shit like that, jumping in certain directions and shit. So yeah, shout out to Max Payne. That shit was a very, very legendary game. I'm happy that's on your list.
I'll even say this as another plug. I love The Matrix. Right?
Ooh.
Matrix is my favorite movie of all time. The first movie. I love the trilogy too. I want to talk about Resurrections. Like, I have appreciation for some of it, but I don't want to talk about it. And The Matrix as well. But
The Matrix is my shit.
now, crazy thing is, right? Max Payne comes out after Matrix, right? But that game was in development probably around the same time as that.
I
movie.
see where you. I see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
I
So
see
check
where you're
this
going
out.
with this.
Check this out. You have Enter the Matrix and Matrix Path to Neo. Those games came out like years after, and the slow-mo is still not as good.
Nowhere near.
mechanics of Max
Nowhere
Payne was.
near.
You
Nowhere
know?
near.
And I will say this: I love Max Payne 3. I love that game. But there's something about Max Payne 2 in terms of just the tone, being in New York, just everything about it. It just felt like, dang, you were just paranoid all the way through. You know what I'm saying? And there was like no sense of like safety in that game. And I feel like, that carried over Max Payne 3, even though it's a different environment, you're in Brazil and stuff. But I think Max Payne 2, it really set the tone for like how to make a great atmospheric crime drama of a game. You know what I mean? And I feel like very few games have ever accomplished that, other than like Alan Wake and some other stuff akin to it. But but the story, the voice acting, everything about that game, perfection. You know what I'm saying? And it's just a shame no one talks about that game as much as it should, especially with the plot twist. Unbelievable.
I think there's still space for them to come out with a Max Payne 4, like eventually. Like, it's one of those games that it could come out. I think it's earned the right to come out when it feels like it. You know what I mean?
Were to, I don't know if I'd want them to, because I think after Max Payne 3 and the way it ended, I kind of was like, I'm satisfied with this ending. I feel
okay. Like they closed the book on it?
Right. Unless they do a thing where it's spaced between, 2 and 3. Then I'd be like, all right, you know what I mean? I think there's something you could do with that, but beyond that, I don't think I'd want them to really.
Now let me ask you, right? Since we're on this topic, and like this genre of video games, have you ever played or heard about Control?
Yes.
All right.
Played it. I never beat it.
You know, it's the same
You know,
same developers as Alan
same
Wake.
developer.
It's in the same
Yep.
universe and shit like that. They
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
reference Alan a couple times in the game and shit like that.
Yeah, and it's crazy actually because that game is very meta.
Very, very.
Like, with its own Remedy,
Yeah,
catalog.
exactly.
It's like Control acknowledges Alan Wake,
Right.
but Alan Wake acknowledges Max Payne. So
Exactly.
It's crazy, like trickle down effect of like, oh, Max Payne is a fictional character in Alan Wake's world, but Alan Wake is a fictional character in the Control world. So
Yep.
you're like, oh, crazy. You know what I'm saying? That would be,
Shit is fire.
if I was to see anything with Max Payne, it would only be if there was a game that combined.
And I was gonna say that I think they're coming out with a game that crosses over with Alan Wake and Control. So if Max Payne would show up and there's some shit, that would be fun.
Yo, that would like
Holy
I'm
shit!
Right now,
Pitch it. Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
Hollywood, you suck. This is why. Imagine this: you're playing a sequel to Control, right? But the sequel to Control is also a sequel to Alan Wake. And the reason why I say this is because imagine Control Part 2. You're playing the game, and there's a moment where you have to, let's say, like, you got to find an item, right? And you got to find a book. And in that book is the book of Alan Wake, the character, right? Written by Sam Blake or whatever. And in order to find whatever thing you need to find, you have to play a mission where you enter that world of Alan Wake. And you got to actually help Alan Wake through whatever he's got to go through, right? And then, as you go through that part, Alan Wake's like, yo, the only way for me to give you whatever you need is I have to find one of my old books, and we have to go through whatever thing, right? And when you go in there, you end up, both characters, Alan Wake and the character Control, end up in the Max Payne world and end up hanging out with Max Payne to go like look for whatever.
Sheesh.
And then when you find the item, that's when you get to go back out of those worlds and then you resume the game right
Not
there.
the Remedy verse. Not the Remedy verse. There
and
it
then
goes.
If you go Alan Wake 3 or something like that, you can acknowledge that these events actually happen. He's like, somebody, and I don't know if it's a figment of my imagination, came into my world and told me I need to go and look for this thing, and I interacted with the character that I actually created, Max Payne. You know what I mean? And I had to go get this thing. And you're like, oh wow, what a great tie. You know what I'm saying? But again, you know what I mean? Like I ain't in those rooms, so they don't want me, man. They don't want me.
Yeah.
So yeah. But and then the last game.
Let's talk about it.
I love the Marvel vs. Capcom games. Of course, I love Marvel vs. Capcom 2. I hold that to such a high regard. I mean, let me just say it. X-Men Children of the Atom, Marvel Superheroes, X-Men vs. Street Fighter, Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter, Marvel vs. Capcom, Marvel vs. Capcom 2. It's 6 games right there, right? But the game that still inspires me to this day is Street Fighter 3rd Strike. That game is a beautiful game, design-wise, music-wise, and just gameplay-wise. I mean, that game was the game that developed the parry system, and to this day, it's just so smooth. And I feel like when playing Street Fighter 6, I'm like, dang, this game is such a good successor to 3. Because 3 set up so many things and surpassed whatever Alpha 3 did. And not only that, because chronologically, Street Fighter 3 at the time was the furthest in the timeline of the games.
Yeah.
Even when Street Fighter 4 came out, Street Fighter 4 was based before Street Fighter 3. So Street Fighter 3 was the furthest in the timeline until Street Fighter 5 and 6.
Right.
But up until that point, you had different characters. There's a whole new roster. And just the design, because, Akimon, what a legendary illustrator and character designer. Because you could see from his artwork from the old Street Fighter games, Street Fighter 2, the Alpha games, Darkstalkers, the transformation of his art style was one thing. But how it translated into a way where it was like, up until that point, I had never seen fighting games that looked that beautiful. And there's some games that I feel like even in 2D kind of overdo it. But that game had a nice sweet spot where it's like, it doesn't feel overdone. It feels just right. And yeah, maybe I'm speaking from nostalgia a bit just because
nah, Third Strike.
I played that game.
Third Strike.
But there's a reason why I think people like Street Fighter 6 a lot. And it's because a lot of Street Fighter 6 really does pull a lot from Street Fighter Third Strike. In terms of, it's the furthest in the timeline now.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, you don't see a lot of the characters from, 5. and it's paving way for new characters, which Third Strike did the same way. With
Yeah,
Alex.
because if I'm not mistaken, I think Third Strike only brought back Ryu and Ken. I think everybody else was brand new.
Yeah, it only brought back Ryu and Ken and Chun-Li.
And Chun-Li. Yeah, there we go.
And then everybody else completely new roster.
And I heard that in the first draft of that game, like when they first dropped it, that Ken and Ryu actually wasn't even in it, and that they added them in towards like the end of it, towards like the end of development, just because, I guess, to make sure they sold like copies and shit like that. But I heard like the original Third Strike plan was like to not have any Return to Street Fighters and that shit. So.
See, I'll say this: I don't know about that, but what I do know is this: when they did drop Third Strike, because you know how like Capcom used to do things, and they're probably still gonna do it in a way where it's like, here's this game, and then here's Street Fighter 2 Turbo, and then Street Fighter 2 Turbo.
Yeah, we had the three. Where we had Third Strike. I think we had New Challengers. Right? It was like Street Fighter 3 New Challengers or some shit like that.
Yeah, and then it was Street Fighter 3 Second Impact, and then
there you go.
Yeah, right. So Ryu and Ken were the only ones from the classic roster that came.
Right.
And they didn't add Chun-Li until Third Strike.
Ah, there we go. Okay, copy.
And so, and that right there was like the perfection, because Chun-Li's that's wifey. You know what I'm saying? So like, that game again, beautiful game. Love the designs, and also I'm a sucker for the Capcom women.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I think the first time I played Third Strike, I think I had Street Fighter Anthology for the PS2, and I think that had Third Strike on it. I had a movie. I had one of the Street Fighter movies on that shit, and
it was a Street Fighter 2.
It was okay. There we go. Yeah, that I'm not gonna lie. I don't even want to look at how much that disc probably is worth right now, because I'm probably gonna be fucking mad that I didn't leave it in the plastic. But bro, Third Strike was fucking. Oh man, that shit was crazy. Look, and soundtrack wise, I've never played a fighting game that has a better soundtrack ever.
I mean, look, none of the Street Fighter games have had a better soundtrack than the Third Strike soundtrack. Like, that was the first. I remember that's, again, growing up as a kid, I listened to a lot of music because, my parents are deaf, so I know sign language, Makota, right? So, my mom particularly, like, what she would do, I mean, both of them would let me read comics, and because they knew that's how I would build my vocabulary in English or whatever. Boom, that. But how I really learned a lot was through watching movies and listening to music. And what I remembered a lot vividly was like MTV, VH1. At night, they'd play music videos, and there'd be music from like different genres depending on the day of the week. So, and then listening to the radio and stuff like that too. So I remember listening to a lot of DMX and hip hop on the radio, but I'd come across like rock and metal and R&B and soul and whatever else. But I remember Street Fighter Third Strike was the game that put me on like trip hop and drum and bass and electronic and ambient and all other kind of stuff. And it was the kind of music where I was like, this is the kind of stuff I've always liked listening to, because there were certain animes I would watch that had that kind of music, but I didn't know what it was, and I didn't know like where to find that. And that game was the game that kind of opened that door for me. So like, oh, this is the thing. And I vividly remember in 7th grade, it was like 2008, Iron Man 1 came out, Dark Knight was just kind of around the corner. So in between that time period, I was playing Third Strike a lot that summer, and that because I just loved that game. And I remember that was when I really started playing guitar more seriously. And what I used to do as practice was like, I didn't know guitar that well back then. I was trash at it, but that's how you start. And I was practicing stuff with Linkin Park's Hybrid Theory album. But then I would play Third Strike, and that was like the thing that bridged the gap. Like, I feel like Linkin Park's Hybrid Theory in that game really did that for me. It was like, this is all the things I like electronic, ambient, I like metal, but I like hip hop as well. And it was a natural fusion that I feel like, again, it's weird now when you think about how far we've come since that time, and how it's more common now, but sometimes I think it's not always commonly executed as great.
Yeah, the heart and the soul isn't always there.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So,
it's hard to imitate that vibe.
Right. Yeah, but I will say those games are like my top 5 that like I always like to revisit. I always like to replay. Anytime I get like a new system, like a Switch, whatever else, like I'll always try to find like a Street Fighter.
Yeah.
If Third Strike's not there, I'll at least get Alpha 3.
Right.
And the reason why
Alpha 3 is my shit, bro. I love Alpha 3.
I gotta add this as well, actually. Alpha 3 is one of my honorary mentions because Alpha 3 was the first Street Fighter game and one of the first fighting games that I remember where you could play co-op.
Okay. Copy.
Like, you could play co-op, and I remember this because my cousin Edwin, you
Gee,
already know
my
him,
man,
Eddie
that's my
Savage.
man's right there.
You know what I mean? So I used to go to his crib a lot when I was like in like middle school, especially. Like, it's one of those things. Like, he's one of my, obviously family. So
Yeah.
I used to go to his crib, me, him, my older cousin Sean, and cousin Emily. So they all played fighting games, whatever. But like me and him, we used to play fighting games a lot, like X-Men Academy, all this stuff. And he was the one that gave me also with Emily's blessing. Cuzzo gave me X-Men Children of the Atom.
Copy.
He also gave me X-Men Mutant Academy.
Oh, you blessed.
Again, crazy.
Mutant Academy was fire, bro. Mutant Academy was
Mutant
fire.
Academy, underrated.
Yes.
So, that being said, I remember we were playing Alpha 3, and we actually played Alpha 3 co-op together. And I remember I was surprised, because I was like, I'd never seen that in any Street Fighter game before that, or after that.
Right.
And I remember it was like, you play the game where it's like, you play as either Ryu or Ken, and then you gotta like face off, whoever you're fighting, and then the last guy you fight is Bison, and you fight them together, and that was like what Street Fighter 2, the movie, was kind of based on.
Yep.
And I was like, wow, I never knew that. So, if I'm wrong, correct me or whatever, but I would say that's what it was mirroring. So I always thought that
I think you're
3, anytime I find it, I'm always like, I gotta get it on whatever console I'm on, because that game's great.
Like the Switch, they came out with that 30th. The 30th collection was really good that they dropped a couple years ago. I got that right up here in the crib. I think it has like Third Strike, Alpha 3 on there, a couple others.
Yeah, man. So those are like my top 5 of those games.
Okay.
But yeah,
all right. So I'll be down real quick. I'll go ahead and give my top 5. So my top 5, no particular order, right? So I'll just go through them real quickly. So we have Symphony of the Night, Castlevania, of course.
Okay, wow.
That probably really turned my passion on for like Metroidvania style games. That really was like the one that did it for me. And it's funny because I beat the game when I got a little older for the 3. Like I re-brought it on the Xbox Live Arcade. I didn't like beat it on the original PS1 and stuff like that. So it's a game that I like came back around to. My dad always talked about it and stuff. And I was like, you know what? Let me see what's going on. And I instantly fell in love with it. Probably spent $200-300 hours on the game, just like running around. No guide, no nothing, just playing the shit. And I think that has one of the best end games in any video game that I've ever seen, where like if you choose to save Richter at the end of the game and you unlock the inverted castle, you basically have to rebeat the game, but from the end of the game to the beginning of the game, but the whole castle is upside down and with like new enemies. So it's like the same exact game, and you're kind of like using your knowledge from the base game to like travel an upside down castle with like strong ass enemies. It was insane, bro. It's actually kind of crazy.
That reminds me of Spider-Man movie game, the first one, where like when you enter the cheat code to play Harry Osborn.
Oh my god, bro.
And then you gotta like actually play the game from his perspective.
Yes. That was fire, bro. That was fire. So we got that in there, right? And then we also have Resident Evil Remake, the first one for the GameCube. It's basically like the original Resident Evil, and that is probably like, on any day I would probably say that's like my favorite game ever. The original Resident Evil, that's my shit. For many reasons, and that, if you kind of think about it, is a Metroidvania game in itself, where you're like unlocking different paths, getting new items and stuff like that. So that's kind of like my shit right there. And then we have Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake Eater. I feel like I shouldn't need to fucking explain why that game is just chef's kiss. You know what I mean? Writing. Hideo Kojima, to be honest, any game that Hideo does, I'm there for. Death Stranding is up there for me as well.
I hope that whatever horror game he's gonna do with Del Toro, I hope that does come out. Like, I know it's supposed to be PT before he left Konami, but whatever horror game he is ended up doing, if he is, I hope he get it.
Well, I think that the shit that he was making with Konami, because he was making the Silent Hill shit, the PT, and then he wound up getting canceled and shit like that, and then they wound up making Death Stranding, because remember, Norman Reedus was going to be the main character of PT. Then they went and did Death Stranding, Norman Reedus is the main character of that. And if you go and play that shit has like a bunch of like Silent Hill elements and shit like that, like with like the BTs and like ghosts and shit like that. Like it's like a lot of shit that goes. You have like this like madness meter almost, like where you like you kind of get scared of like the ghosts and shit like that. You have to like manage all of that shit. So it's kind of cool. Death Stranding is actually it might have cracked top 10 for me. I'm not gonna. Death Stranding is fucking awesome. Death Stranding is dope.
Man, it's a hell of a game. I'll admit. The story is crazy. I'll admit. I gotta add this though too, because I think it's because I heard that Kojima is working with Juji Ito.
Oh, okay. So they might be making some brand new shit then. That would be
Yeah,
fucking
so-
amazing.
And you know, Juji Ito,
Yeah.
that man, wholesome guy, but a scary mom.
He's a scary man for sure. For sure. So yeah, we got Castlevania, Resident Evil, Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake Eater, and then we're gonna have to go with Gears of War 2. But we could I guess we could just put the whole franchise in. Just put the whole franchise in at that point. Gears is my shit.
Gears is classic.
Yeah, bro. Gears is like the first, and even to this day, like the first game that I really got into, like competitive, like the first shooting game I got into competitively. The only one I really mastered and got good at and spent countless days on and shit. I think in Gears 4 or 5 I have like 60 days logged just online alone.
Wow.
Like I didn't even can't like just straight 60 days of my life just on that game. So Gears 2 is my shit. And then I also have Zelda in there as well. Now my Zelda selection, it could change between we got Twilight Princess, Wind Waker, and I think I have to throw in Breath of the Wild / Tears of the Kingdom now, just because those games are so crazy. Like I've never seen a video game where it's like, since Mario 64, where I'm like, if I needed to show a caveman or like a fucking Neanderthal a video game, and I needed to like explain like this is what a video game can be and this is what you can do with a video game, I would probably show them either Super Mario 64 or Breath of the Wild. I would show them one of those two games.
You know what's crazy is I recently was playing Tears of the Kingdom at my friend's house. He was like, "Yo, you should try this game."
Yeah.
And I was playing it, and I was like, "This game is so beautiful."
Too much. It's too much, bro.
Yeah, there's a lot. It's almost overwhelming.
No, it's not even almost, bro.
Gotta do in that game. You know
I have not finished the game yet, bro. I've had the games. I didn't even need to go out. I went hard, left work early to go buy the game, day of and shit like that. And look, bro, I haven't done shit in the game because I'm like, oh shit, I could put a wheel on a wooden block and make a fucking car and shit. And people, and then you get online, people are building Gundams and fucking Batmobiles.
Whatever, something like that.
Bro, I'm gonna try to find a clip. I'll put it in the video when we post this up on YouTube and shit. YouTube.com/BetweenVillains, of course. But somebody built the fucking the Tumbler Batmobile from fucking Dark Knight Rises, and the shit he rides it as Link, and he detached something while he's riding it, and the shit turns into the fucking motorcycle. Like the motorcycle comes out the shit. I'm like, yo, bro, get the fuck. And to me, that like that's like a whole different type of art. We talk about like artistry, like when it comes to like Minecraft or like speed running and shit, like just shit that you do in video games. That shit is crazy, bro. So that's what I'm saying. Like if I had to show somebody what a video game could be, I'll probably throw Minecraft in it too. I'll probably throw in Breath of the Wild and shit. So yeah, man, any one of those days, it could be one of those Zelda games. I feel like I had to have a Zelda on my top 5 just because they set the tone for a lot of the games I have come to love, like Dark Souls and shit like that. Dark Souls, if you go and play, you know, a lot of the shit is based off of Ocarina of Time. Like, you know, as far as NPC quest lines that have nothing to do with the story, that you have to go out and explore on your own, little secrets, dungeons, even the ladder system, and just a bunch of shit. The lock-on system was originated in Ocarina of Time and Zelda and shit like that. So we like, without that, we don't have any of these other games that I love. So always got to keep a Zelda in my 5. So that's my 5. It's kind of safe, you know. Resident Evil, Gears, Metal Gear, Castlevania, and Zelda. All household names and shit. I didn't have no fucking cool. I don't have no cool picks like you. You got fucking you got extra legends.
Those are some solid picks.
Yeah.
Like I almost forgot about it.
It's my shit, baby.
Playing Gears of War 1 when it first came out with my buddy Dougie. Shout out to Dougie. You know, like we played that game back when we were like when I was in 6th grade, going into 7th grade.
Yeah.
I remember that was like the summer of 2007. We got the game, playing that game, and I just remember we literally stayed up all night and beat that game. When you play that last mission on that that train, and you fight
you fight Rom, you fight General Rom.
Yeah. With all the crows or whatever.
Yeah,
man,
the crows is wild.
Talk about anxiety. I think the first game, there's something special about that first game though. That atmosphere was something different that I think that like the other games they do get, but that first game, it was just something about that one, man.
I'll tell you why. So if you go back and you go and look at like an interview or like, you know, press run about the first Gears and shit, almost all of it, I don't want to say all of it, but it's basically a love letter to Resident Evil 4.
No wonder.
Yeah, you know, you got the chain, like they literally took the chainsaw mechanic from Resident Evil 4 and put it on your gun in Gears, because Cliff Blazinski was so like he loved Resident Evil 4. That was one of his favorite games. So
Right.
he took the aiming system from Resident Evil 4. You know, if you peep like the over the shoulder, they took that completely from there. They took the chainsaw mechanic. They took like some of the enemy designs and like the tight corridors and stuff. That's why I felt very like survival horror-ish, because it was kind of like a love letter to Resident Evil. But then, you know, the game kind of evolved into like more of a shooter, competitive shooter. So it kind of grew into something else. But that first game, even I would say the first 1.5, like 2 up until like the midway point, all of that shit is just fucking Resident Evil action mode or some shit. Like that shit is, you know what's going on. Gears of War 1 on Insane, you have to fucking conserve ammo, you have to take cover, you can't like, that shit is fucking frustrating, bro. That shit is
like
hard.
you can't just, that was a game where you can't just run up to people. Like you have to be strategic.
Oh no. Yeah.
And it really was, I think that's what I think is also interesting between the parallel between that and Resident Evil 4 as well. Is like those games, you had to be very careful with how you went on the offense. Because there was a lot of defense in terms of just like, you gotta sneak around, you gotta know where, you gotta know your layout before you get into the battle, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
I think those games, especially the first Gears of War, really has a sweet spot for me. That's another honorary mention now that you made me think about that, because like,
Nice.
I loved the other games, but I think to me the first game, like you mentioned, it was the survival horror aspect of that game
Fucking beautiful,
that
bro.
I feel like was lost.
And the gore.
You know?
The gore kind of like was like it was like like when Mortal Kombat came out, I talked about it in my Tekken video that I dropped a couple weeks ago. But like when Mortal Kombat dropped, it was kind of like Eminem in a rap game. It was like culture shock, you know, like holy shit, what the fuck is this? And that's kind of like what Gears of War was, because up until Gears, like we had like Call of Duty, we had SOCOM games, we had, you know, like these cool shooters. But now that you can step on somebody's fucking head and that shit is coming off, that's what you're telling me? I can shoot somebody's fucking eye off? Like, come on.
Yeah, and you know what too is the funny thing you mentioned too, because that was at a time when like, you know, we started getting those like, you know, first-person shooter games, and we didn't have any of those kind of games that was based in like successfully based in like a fictional world, or like, you know, or had the great gameplay mechanics and stuff like that, or had a good solid atmosphere and tone that combined elements of a first-person shooter with a third-person game like Resident Evil 4. And I feel like Gears of War 1 was that nice marriage between those two elements that made it like that thing. And like you said with Mortal Kombat, that was the other thing too, is that Gears wasn't afraid to be gory. So it was like that nice love child of Mortal Kombat, Resident Evil, and Call of Duty that made that trifecta. And I feel like, again, it's one of those things I think people forget about as time is going on. And, you know, I think like this new generation that is playing video games now, you know, and there's no fault to them, of course, but it's like, I think a lot of people forget that Gears of War opened a lot of doors that made everybody else step their game up.
Absolutely.
Because then after that, I think, what was it, World at War came out, and then
they try to get
zombie mode.
Yeah, they try to get on their on their bullshit. And it's crazy, bro. At work, I got called an old head the other day for telling some young kid, you know, he just got hired at my job and shit. He's like, yo, you know, we talk about Between Villains, you know, I tell him like, you know, I love video games and shit, you know, getting into my spiel, getting into my bullshit. He's like, yo, bro, what games do you play? And usually when people ask me that, they want to know what competitive games, like they want to know if I play Call of Duty. Basically, they want to know if I play Fortnite or fucking Call of Duty or Apex Legends. And, you know, I'm like, I actually play Gears of War, bro. He's like, oh shit, you play Gears, bro? You an old head. I'm like, you little motherfucker.
Yeah, I remember, it's funny, I remember, you know, I was with my bandmates, right? We was in this little get-together, one of my bandmates was, his wife was having, and we was meeting some people, and we met this one girl who, she was talking with me and one of my bandmates' girlfriends, or whatever, right? We were all chatting it up, talking about, like, you know, stuff that we like, music, whatever. And she's like, you know, she's very much, like, you know, into, like, pop punk, folk punk, emo stuff, whatever, right? And then we're talking to her, and she asks us how old we are, right? And then we tell our age, and she's like, "Oh my God, you guys like elder emos?" And she's like, "Wait, you guys were there when like
when it was forged? When it was forged?
Yeah. When it was a thing, when it wasn't like a pretty popular thing or something like that, right?" And I was like, I took a step back, like, damn,
bro.
I'm really that. I'm that now.
And you know what I noticed? A lot of people our age, like our generation, we don't look 30. None of us
No, we
ever look
don't.
30. We all look like we haven't aged since fucking 12th grade, bro. That shit is the
Yeah,
weirdest shit ever.
I don't know if it's something in the water.
Nah,
All I
94
learned-
94 might have been the greatest year of all time.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's some
94
great
might have been
albums
it.
that came out that year, but
Yeah, bro.
I'd even also say I think our generation in particular did something that I don't think any generation.
We had
prior
that blend,
to-
man. I've had a CD player. I've had a fucking Walkman. I've had a beeper. I've had an iPhone. I've had an iPhone 14 Pro Max. I've had it all. I've done it all, baby.
Yeah. Like, yo, literally, I've always joked about this with friends or whatever. And I tell this to a lot of people. Our generation is the transitionary generation. Like, we went from analog to digital.
Literally.
So we had video games and we went outside.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Both
Like,
of them. A healthy blend of both.
Yeah, and also I think it's interesting too, right? Because you never want to be old man young at the sky, but I think it's interesting. Like every generation has their fair share of like pros and cons.
Right.
And I remember speaking to a friend's nephew, and he was like, in this day and age, it's kind of crazy with like people do things for clout on social media. People get each other killed, and I was like, I remember the days when Bloods and Crips was prominent in New York. Like I remember you had to be careful on what block you was walking out on.
Well, what color hoodie and shit like that, all of
if
that.
you had a do-rag,
Oh man, forget about it. Forget about it.
Oh man, they ask you like, what set you from? You're like, oh nah, I just like to wear this because
You better have made sure you was Ryu if you had a red head.
Mm-hmm.
The only person that was allowed to wear a red headband was Ryu. That wasn't
and that was the only man who could bet that everybody let fly.
Yeah, because they don't want to see him.
And look, I remember Vermont coats when people used to get killed for that. You know what I'm
Yo,
saying?
bro,
Like,
I was there for that
Vermont.
shit, bro. I was there for all
Yeah,
that shit.
so
Bro.
it was a crazy time, but I'd say the reason why this is an interesting thing in terms of the stuff we talk about with pop culture is that like every generation has their thing, and I think our generation is just we're in that interesting space where it's like again, the generation prior and the generation after, like mental health became such a big focal point and came to the forefront because of our generation.
Rightfully
right?
so.
Because we saw it from our parents, and then a lot of stuff that we consumed started to really like address and acknowledge stuff. Because again, social media, we were there before it was even a thing, and we were there as it started to become the thing that it is today.
Exactly.
Right, and we saw it in real time. And what would take probably more than 40 to 50 years, we saw that in just only a quarter. You know what I mean? So it's kind of crazy when you think like with video games in particular, like we have the PS4, now we're in the PS5. But we were there with PS1.
Literally the P1, bro.
Yeah, and even before the P1, which is even crazy. You know what I'm saying? So it says a lot about like, it makes you wonder what kids are consuming, and as they get older, like what's it going to be like for them? Because technology has advanced so much in our lifetime. Like if you told me back then when like that we were going to get an X-Men movie,
right?
I would have never believed so because all we had was Tim Burton's Batman and Christopher Reeve's Superman, and we had Blade. But beyond that, we didn't really have anything that cutting edge aside from like the Matrix, right? So if you told me that we're gonna have Spider-Man in 2002 and Matrix came out in like 1999,
right?
I would have never thought in any way, shape, or form, because you would see the stuff in cartoons, you think there's no way they had the budget for CGI, there's no technology.
Yeah, I remember like my dad was telling me about Spider-Man back in the day when I was a kid, and I was like, what do you mean it's gonna be with real people? How is the suit gonna look? And I remember I used to actually be worried, like, is this shit gonna look whack? And then I remember the first trailer, him fucking swinging past the fucking taxi and shit, and woo, and you see the silver pipe, and I'm like, oh no, this shit is fucking.
And it goes
amazing.
to show how far things have come, and why, like, it's good to have these kind of discussions about, like, the stuff that we like and seeing how much they progress. Because look, before our time, parents had certain stuff, and that stuff wasn't as popular as it started to become somewhat in our time. But now it's popular for Gen Z, these other kids, that it's commonplace.
That's a fact.
Right? And it's not to say, like, we had it rough with it, but it's more like, there was a time when, like, this wasn't, like, there was a time when you couldn't have a career in video game.
Yeah.
Where, like, you spent your
Well,
time
at least me and you couldn't. People that look like me and you, definitely not. Definitely not.
Right? And now it's like you got esports. Right? Like esports, that wasn't a thing until like maybe when we were like in middle school.
Yeah, bro, you have a
And even
Dominican kid running the Street Fighter 6 scene right now. Like that shit is
It's
beautiful,
crazy.
bro. That shit is fucking beautiful, bro.
Yeah, it's a beautiful sign of progress, and I think that just goes to show that, like, I think if people try to get past themselves and realize, like, the most important thing is seeing the things that you love live on beyond you, right? Because if it doesn't, like, if it dies with you, then, like, what was the point, right? Like, it needs to survive, so that way that legacy and that love for such things carry over. Because when we talk about the MCU, for example, right? Like, think about it. Within that 15-year time frame from Iron Man 1 to, like, Infinity War, how many people passed away?
Like in real life?
Yeah, in real life, in our lifetime. How many people you might have known passed away, right? That probably never got to see Infinity.
I think about that
right?
shit a lot. I think about that shit a lot. Like people that may want to see some shit, and it's like, I think about that sometimes myself. Like, shit, the MCU might keep it going. I might not be here for fucking, I don't know, like for Noel. I might not be here for Noel or some shit. You know, for I don't know, one of the Krakoa. If they ever gonna get into, I might not be here.
But the beautiful thing about that is that it's like the memory shared with community that lives on, right? And as long as the community still exists and thrives, that's what matters most. And that is like a sign of that. Like, even when people pass away or whatever, the memories of, I remember when I went to this movie and saw it with this dude or whatever, or that person, and yo, this and this. When I look back on this, I always think to that time period, and like, I'm very appreciative of that because now I see my kids thrive, this and that. Like, that stuff is so important. And I feel like people get too lost in the sauce of, well, you know, this is mine. It's only exclusively mine. And it's like, if it's only exclusively yours and it dies with you, then like, it's over for all of us. You know what I mean? So the culture has to continue on beyond us, whether we like it or not. And I think that, again, talking about the significance of these touchstones from I love Spider-Man PlayStation 1. Right. We love Gears 1, Mario 64. Those games opened the door for all the other games that kids are playing now that, like, you know, to them it's like, I don't know, ancient times. But like, you know, for us it's like, yo, it was only yesterday. Right. And yesterday was only maybe 15 years ago. You know what I mean? So, you know, it's a beautiful thing. And I think that, like, when you see that, how it brings people together, that's the most important factor that, you know, people should highlight more of rather than not.
That's a fact. And before we wrap things up, last topic I do want to get into it with you about is the comic book scene. There's a lot of shit going on right now in Marvel Comics. You know, I'm not the biggest DC comic, I don't want to say fan because I'm a fan. But as far as like consistent reader with the DC books, like I haven't read nothing since like Dark Crisis, so I don't really know what's going on in that landscape. But I have been keeping my eyes open with the Marvel shit. Obviously, you know I love Marvel. So Ultimate Universe is back. We could talk about that. We got what Ultimate Invasion is the name?
I believe, I think it's called Ultimate Invasion. Yeah, I know Jonathan Hickman is writing it.
We got that reveal too of Miss Marvel coming back, like we predicted. They're gonna actually make her mutant this time since Marvel, she's the train. Since Marvel has the rights to like the mutants and stuff like that, they're gonna actually go through with it. Synergy. Yeah, so I just want to touch on like what's going on right there. How you feel about everything going on, books that you may be reading, anything like that you want to talk about as well.
Okay, so it's funny because recently the website that I write comic book reviews for, we finally like patched up our relationship with Marvel.
And can we shout the website out?
Oh yeah, so, Fanboy Factor.
Copy. That's fanboyfactor.com.
Yep, fanboyfactor.com. Okay. So my editor Brian. So here's a little history, right? Before I got on the Fanboy Factor, I started back in 2016, so it's been like 7. Right now, after this year, it's gonna be 8. Crazy, I've been on that for 8 years. That's sheesh. So, prior to right when Fox and Marvel was having that whole dispute before Disney bought Fox, when like Marvel decided to cancel Fantastic Four and some of the like other Fantastic Four associated books. Yeah. You know, that fallout caused a lot of uproar, right? So my editor at the time, he was so tight about that he had a verbal spat with, you know, whoever was like the higher ups at Marvel, and that caused him not to, I guess, like get any solicitations from Marvel for like almost a decade. Wow. So it had been a long road for him to get, you know, repair that
to repair that
relationship.
relationship, right?
Yeah, so which is why when people used to ask me like, "Yo, how come you're not reviewing like Marvel books or whatever stuff like that?" And it was like, "Oh, because like we don't get them."
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. You were reviewing a lot of indie shit for the last couple of years. I seen that.
Yeah. Like I review a lot of indie and DC stuff because DC we still have a good relationship with them, so we would still get stuff from them. But unfortunately, you know, people on the internet like to like leak stuff or whatever, so it's kind of caused a bit of a caution tape from DC side of things, where it's like now they're very much more cautious. So like when it comes to access to their books, it's like you gotta lock in all these other things, go through all these loopholes.
NDAs probably, shit like that.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, you know, and I understand it, you know what I mean? Because it's like, you know, it's a lot of hard work, people who work within that field that want to, like, you know, whether you like the stories or not, they put a lot of time and effort into making that stuff. And for all that stuff to just get spoiled, which is
that
why
shit sucks, bro. That shit sucks.
Yeah, I think that's why comic book journalism, for the most part, sucks nowadays, because all they do is spoil without discretion. With all these headlines, instead of just saying, "Hey, this major thing, spoilers. If you don't want to read, spoil." Like, you know, like just be courteous, right? Now, there's some idiots that just they know it's spoilers. They jump in and then they're mad at the spoiler. And it's like, my dude, either your reading comprehension is trash or you just plain stupid.
Or you just don't.
Yeah, you just don't care. You know.
Yeah.
But for me, you know, I like comic books, whether it's Marvel, DC, or just whatever. If it's a good story and it's a good writer, artist team, you know, and it looks like they care about what they're making and it's actually good, that's what I care about. And for context with DC, in recent years I've come to appreciate more out of continuity stuff than in continuity stuff. Like, I don't mind continuity stuff, but I like out of continuity stuff because I think there's a lot more stakes. So you know what I mean? So you don't have to worry about like, oh, this is a MacGuffin. It's like, nah, like if the character dies, they die. Like,
you know what I've come to notice? Just to add on real quick, not even to cut you off.
Yeah.
When it comes to like those in continuity events that go on in like comic books, you can always almost fucking put your money on it that shit is gonna go back to the way it was. Whereas with the out of continuity shit, I was reading like some old Maestro shit where he was fighting like Hercules, like where Hulk was fighting Hercules and shit like that and Hercules was like the original Maestro. And it's like, you can't do shit like that in the main continuity because you're gonna have to eventually go back to the main status quo at the end of the day. So I kind of agree with you on that.
And also, you know, superhero comics are cyclical, right? And they're supposed to be. It's like, I think whenever I see people get mad about like, oh, they're ruining and I'm like, my nigga, like you if you love this character so much, you have all these other back issues and stories. That's always gonna be there. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, like I remember when people tell me, I'm so mad that Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch are no longer mutants for that period in time, and I was like,
yeah,
it still is me. I don't really care. It's not gonna ruin my life.
You could choose what to, especially with Marvel too. They step on their foot so much when it comes to like what the fuck is in and out of continuity that it's like you could choose.
And especially with the MCU synergy.
Yeah,
you know
bro.
I mean?
That shit is weird.
And this is where I say, going to the question, right? Like, for example, Miss Marvel. I've seen some uproar about like, Miss Marvel's a mutant, and it's like, she's a mutant and a human.
Right.
Okay.
Is that what they're gonna do with that story? Is she gonna be like a hybrid of both?
Yeah. So what it seems like is that even though that issue of Spider-Man, which is, I mean, I don't want to crap on Zeb Wells or whatever, but I will say, like, I know that's not his fault. I think this is more like editorial. It's just like, here's what we're gonna do with this, so we can do this, right? So, Miss Marvel sacrificed herself to save Spider-Man against like this old Zeb Wells villain from like 10 years ago or something like that, and she dies, right? So I think they came out with an issue about like the death of Miss Marvel, and it's like they had like a whole funeral thing.
Yeah.
And Cyclops is there at one point, and first and foremost, I should say Miles should be more mad at Spider-Man, not Cyclops. There's a whole thing about that I won't get into. You gotta read. You know, for those who don't want spoilers, read free stuff. Like, actually read it. Don't go on like, you know, some stupid
Comics Explained, Comic Storian, some shit. Like, actually read it.
I like Comic Storian.
Yeah.
You know, I would say like
I usually use those
Instagram pages that have no real research and credibility. Like,
yeah, they just say shit. They might give you the wrong information. They might give you the wrong info too.
So that being said, and I like Comic Stories, so you know he's
I do too. I listen to them, but not for the books that I actually want to read. Like I use them for books that I might not have time to like access and shit like that. Yeah.
So look, shout out to Comic Pop. Shout out
to, they, bro. they're goated. That's an art form in
Yeah,
itself.
yeah.
That's a whole art form in itself.
Yeah, for sure. So that being said, yeah, so it's a hybrid, and I mean, obviously they did it because synergy with the upcoming Marvels movie and synergy with the MCU, and you know, after Miss Marvel the show, when they revealed her as a mutant, yeah, in the MCU, which you know we didn't expect it,
Bro, that shit was
thought.
one of the biggest twists in any Disney Plus show of all time.
I was like, what? She's a mutant, huh? So I knew that at some point that they were gonna do something with the comics, and I guess with the whole Krakoa thing with X-Men, it makes sense with the whole, you know, using the original 5 to revive any dead person and make them into a mutant of some sort,
Right.
or whatever. So I think that is fine because, funny enough, Miss Marvel actually was supposed to be a mutant before she was a human.
Right.
And the only reason why she was made it to be an Inhuman was because the whole Marvel Fox rights at the time.
It was
Marvel didn't want to give Fox like
a movie.
another, like,
they didn't want to give him a movie idea and shit.
Yeah. So they were like, we're gonna make her an Inhuman.
Especially with especially with Miss Marvel, with that character, because of her heritage, she's so easy to like pander to certain audiences with and shit like that. So like they like, bro, like I'm not gonna lie, like if they handle Miss Marvel the right way, she'll be one of the most popular characters in the MCU. You could already tell, like especially with Iman Vellani and shit like that, like.
Yeah, yo, first off, shout out to that actress because she knows her stuff.
Isn't she co-writing the book or some shit?
Yeah, she's gonna be co-writing the whole like revived Miss Marvel as a mutant.
That's
and
fucking
I'm like,
dope.
Solid, you know what I mean? And this is the thing too. So I think for me, I'm fine with it because there's nothing really changed about her character at all. She's still Miss Marvel. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just that okay, she's a mutant in addition to an Inhuman. But I always felt like it's funny because.
You're gonna say, I feel like you're gonna say the same. Well, me and my dad, you know, we done had multiple conversations with my dad before about comics and shit.
Yeah, for sure.
We were saying that like after the AXE shit, it felt kind of like all deviation from original, like, you know, human DNA would be classified as like a mutant anyway. So it kind of like, it kind of felt like that. The only shit that bothered me is that I always felt like Miss Marvel was the most popular Inhuman. So like I always relied on her. Yeah, you know, I love my Inhuman, so I always relied on her to make everybody else more like fucking like interesting and more like important and shit like that. But I you know, X-Men was the original, like fuck the Inhumans and shit. X-Men was the original like misfit group of people and shit like that. So if you're gonna have a character like Miss Marvel, it makes sense that she is a fucking X-Men or mutant.
But I think what's also great actually that you mentioned is that she can still be that representation for the humans and the X-Men now, because she's probably more popular than she's ever been. And on top of that, it's like we live in a generation that's not that familiar with X-Men like that.
Yo, bro, right? they gotta get everything reintroduced. They gotta reintroduce everything.
Like I always say, this generation, Gen Z, is the Avengers generation. And I say because all they know of is the Avengers. We wasn't
really on the Avengers like that when we were growing up. Like Avengers was cool, obviously, but X-Men, Spider-Man, come on.
Yeah, X-Men, Spider-Man,
Fantastic Four, obviously.
Yeah, like when you look at like who the top 3 things that people recalled of Marvel when we were growing up, it was Spider-Man, Wolverine, and Hulk. Right? Like they didn't really acknowledge all the Avengers characters like that.
Bro, Daredevil, in my opinion, Daredevil was a more popular character than almost the whole roster of Avengers. I would rather have. Yeah. Come on, bro. DD was the GOAT.
Look, Daredevil had a movie before.
Yeah, there we go. Yep.
You know what I'm saying? So, like, yo, I mean, even Elektra
had got a movie before the whole Avenger roster, literally.
Right, you know what I'm saying? The Avengers, like, Marvel really took a chance on that. You know what I'm saying? And
right.
I think everyone knows the story of the MCU at this point.
Yeah.
So, so I feel like Miss Marvel, I think it's fine. I always say, like, superhero comics are cyclical. So for me, I'm like, okay, you know, like they probably might have her as a mutant one day, and then next you know they'll make it just go completely back to being a human. Like they did the same thing with Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch. Like they were no longer mutants, and then after the whole Krakoa era stuff, it's like, oh hey, now they're mutants. Like Scarlet Witch is a mutant again. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, you know, and I mean if you look at it, even during your dad's time and my dad's time, right? Like Peter Parker being with Mary Jane was a big thing at the time because everybody was like, Peter Parker should be with Gwen, right? Up until that point, until Gwen dies. And then Mary Jane came, like, I know a dude, shouts to Helmet, who, you know, he grew up, you know, he's an old guy, grew up on comics from the silver, gold, and bronze age of comics, right? So, like, to him, Gwen Stacy is Spider-Man's girl.
Spider-Man,
He doesn't like MJ.
yeah.
He never wanted MJ and Peter to get married.
That got
So
it.
when you hear that, it's nuts because for me, we grew up.
MJ,
and
MJ's the one.
And I'm still gonna say it. MJ's that girl.
Of course, yeah, bro. Of course.
So,
Gwen is fire, but Gwen is not for Peter, though.
And look,
yeah.
Gwen only became popular in recent years because of Amazing Spider-Man 2. And because
even more so with the Miles shit now too, Gwen. Like even though it's a different version of Gwen, like just the that name means so much more now than it did before.
Yeah, because I mean, look, 2014, Amazing Spider-Man 2 was coming out around the same time. That's when Dan Slott was doing the Spider-Verse comic. Right. And so when they did that whole tie-ins and Spider-Gwen series came out, like the mini-series, that was to have synergy with the Amazing Spider-Man 2 movie. So like when you think about it, it's like, I mean, not that Dan Slott probably knew. It's most likely Marvel obviously was like, hey, let's do this so that way this, goes concurrent with the movie, so that way people who like the stuff might be interested in going to read comics, right? So that really put Gwen Stacy on the map even further because Emma Stone's chemistry with Andrew Garfield, and then you got Spider-Gwen. But no one knew Spider-Gwen was going to be that popular until, like, she got popular, and then Spider-Verse movies really just made her skyrocket after that, right? So that being said, yeah, it's like, things are cyclical, you know what I'm saying? Like, superhero comics, that's why, like, for me, I don't really get that crazy about it. Like, I remember when people heard, oh, man, Superman's gay. It's like, no, Superman's son is bi.
Yeah.
John. No, Clark Kent is not. He's straight, but his son is bi. Like, if you don't want to read that book, you don't have to read that book. That's not for you. That's not for you, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can, like, your favorites are still around. But then, all right, I don't want to take this any, like, take it up any further.
No. Do your thing, bro.
Alright, so what I can't stand, I want something new. Alright, we give you something new. But not like this. Okay. We give you back the old. Why ain't you give me something new?
That shit
you don't
is
know what you want.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what you want. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes they don't give us good quality stuff. I get that. But man, you say you want to move on from this, but then you complain like, all right, Peter Parker. I'm in that camp of, Peter Parker needs to retire. The man needs to retire. Either he takes a back seat and lives his life with MJ and just coaches Miles, or, he's already a mentor to Miles, but I think at this point, Miles is better off, he's just better off on his own now. Like, he's just so good as a character now. Like,
he can stand on his own. Yeah. I'm
actually
actually getting scared. I'm getting like a little scared that they might try to change him from being Spider-Man one day to being like his own fucking superhero. Like I don't know. I like him as Spider-Man. Yeah,
because he's the Spider-Man of our generation now.
I caught Marvel saying some shit the other day that people in the comment section were going off on him. It was like they called everybody by their superhero name except for Miles. They didn't call him Spider-Man in the caption that they wrote. They called him Miles Morales. And it was just like, bro, he's Spider-Man though, bro. You could just call him Spider-Man. It's cool to just say Spider-Man, bro. It's all right.
Yeah, because I'm like, treat it like Blue Beetle. Right?
Yeah.
Like, Ted Cord, and then you got Jaime Reyes.
Exactly.
Blue Beetle. You know what I'm saying? So, and I feel like it's good for Peter Parker to grow his character because I think he's been stuck in this like weird 20-year rut of like being a
fucking like too mascotish, too much like I know what you mean, bro. I know what you mean on that.
When you read like the good part of the J. Michael Straczynski, bro, it's like Spider-Man is this, he was a science teacher. He actually was a really cool guy. He had his life together to some degree, or at least was getting his life together. Married with MJ, relationship's really nice. And that was before the whole one more date thing with Joe Quesada or whatever and stuff like that. But like the point is, Peter Parker actually was growing as a character.
I even enjoyed the Parker Industries shit. Like later on down the line, I enjoyed that too with the new upgraded suit. Cool.
Yeah, I will say this. Yeah, I feel like Dan Slott's run, I think, went on a little too long. But I will say I like the Parker Industries stuff only because it was something different, and it was like, hey, and look. People have said it for a long time, right? If Peter Parker's so smart, how come he's not a billionaire? Now we got to see what he was like as a billionaire. He was terrible. But it's like, hey, we got that. Now we have that. Now people can't say, oh, how come this? No, we got that already. You know what I'm saying? So, but I feel like for me, I feel like, fandoms themselves, not the positives, but more the negative sides of fandoms, or toxic fandoms. I feel like, you know, they're always gonna complain about anything and everything, but they're the same ones that'll still go and read it. Like, put your money where your mouth is. If you don't like that, then go read certain stuff or support original stuff if you don't like that stuff. If you're saying, oh, all you do is the same stuff, it's like, okay then, either you make something or you go and support the things that you like, that you believe in. You know what I mean? Like, it's either one of the two. Like, and also, I've learned this, I have to always keep in mind, right? Stuff that I like growing up, right? Like, we love Ben Riley. The generation before hated Ben Riley.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And then, like, the generation after us, they like whoever they gonna like, and we'll be like, I don't like this character. But then it's like, hey, there's characters that we like that the generation before us didn't like. But now they're iconic characters that now everybody's starting to love, right? So it's one of those things where you're like, these are cycles of superhero comics, so it's why, like, I don't really sweat it like that. There might be some things I think is like piss poor, like if you could tell, like, they're just trying to do things to make a sale.
Get a reaction out of you just for the sake of getting a reaction out of you, not for really telling a story. Yeah, that shit sucks.
And I think for me, I'm not gonna sweat my time and energy on it. I'm just like, okay, it's just not for me, so I'm not gonna put money for that. Like, you know, your money talks. So it's like, all right, that's not for me. It's not for me. I'm not gonna go buy it. So it's not for me. Someone else might enjoy it, and that's what gets them into comics. That's a win, right? Because comics can't thrive without youth. Like, youth is what keeps comics alive. Like, I think the biggest issue in comics at times is kind of like, aside from a bunch of issues in comics, but I think one of the biggest issues is like, you got a lot of people in their 40s, 50s, and whatever else, right? And they're talking about, oh, why aren't comics thriving? And then you got all these young kids who probably want to get into comics, but they don't know where to start. And it's kind of just, they're just burdened with all the stuff that just doesn't quite speak to them, right? And there's a reason why, like, manga appeals so much, because it's one continuity, one straight story, beginning, middle, and end. You know what I'm saying?
And they're consistent. Like, they be consistently dropping them shits. Yeah.
So, and you know, it's a different type of comic medium, but it's still comics, right? So it's one of those things. It's like, and also, animes. Most animes are direct, faithful adaptations to the manga. So what you see in the manga is what you're gonna see in that anime most of the time, right? And I feel like the issue with, I'd say, American superhero stuff is that it's just, while there's beauty in the fact that there's a multiverse of different things, the hardest part is, what is it that's going to attract the younger audience to that one thing that they can particularly tether themselves to? But that's why stuff like Across the Spider-Verse is a good example of why you need stuff like that. Because if kids can't find things for them to connect to, the medium dies, right? And for that medium to grow, you need youth.
We ain't gonna be around forever. I said we ain't gonna be around forever. Like, you gotta always.
Right, and it's like, if kids don't enjoy this kind of stuff, there won't be anybody to keep this thing going after. And you know, at the end of the day, we were kids when we got into this stuff, right? And now look at how it's transformed their lives for the better in terms of, you know, better reading comprehension, critical thinking, opening the door to other kinds of mediums beyond comics, books, movies, all this other stuff that open the gateway for you, right? And so that's very much important with that. So that's why when it comes to all this uproar with, like, you know, Twitter and all these other people, and they get mad about, oh, look what they do to my look how many times Superman has had different changes, or how Batman has had different changes over the years. And guess what? He's still Batman.
Absolutely.
You know, like, oh, I like the Bat family is so big. Okay, but like, your favorite Robin was your favorite Robin for your generation. Like, our generation's Robin was Tim Drake.
Right, absolutely.
You know what I mean? And now Damian is the most prominent Robin, and then Jason Todd is now, like, you know, just as much. So it's like, you know, you keep in mind that, like, this isn't just for me. Like, this is always going to be for the people after us. You know, we all, like, if you want to look for the things you love, you always have it, because we have it. But if you really want to look for stuff that's really good, you always go to the indies. You know what I mean? And that's where, like, you'll find really good stuff there. That's why Invincible, you know what I mean? Invincible popped off. Yeah. And that was an indie comic before it became so popular. And I remember when nobody knew what Invincible was, other than, like, you know, people that actually read comics and was like, yeah, this is a cool series. Like, what if Spider-Man has Superman's powers? And, like, not just Superman's powers, but what if, like, they were just, like, unchained? What would that be like? And then suddenly, boom, Invincible, and you're like, dang, this comic is crazy. Like, I remember the plot twist. And I remember thinking when the show was coming out, I was like, dang, I wonder how soon or how late
they're gonna get into it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when they did, it was like, wow, look how many people responded to Invincible and then The Boys.
Yeah.
Like, people
I was
love
gonna
The
say
Boys.
that. My first book that I've ever read, like I grew up obviously reading Marvel and DC and shit, more so Marvel, but I never really ventured out of those two, those two publishers and shit like that. So I wanna say it was like 2012. I want to say like around 2014, 2015. I was working at this office job on like 92nd and 2nd in the city and shit like that. And, my dad, I always talk about my dad when I get into comic books because he was like my gateway into that and shit. And he recommended me this book, like this trade paperback. You know how they collect like a whole volume. It'll be probably like 4 to 5 issues in one collection and shit like that. So he gives me the book and the shit it's called The Boys, Volume 1. And I'm at work reading it. I'm like, what the fuck is this, bro? And it got so crazy, like, bro, like the comics are so much more crazy than the show is. Even though the show was great writing and shit, but like as far as like gore and the crazy shit that happens, the books are fucking crazy. But yeah, man, that was like one of the first indie books that I read, and it's like that's something that I want to get more into. It's like reading non-Marvel and non-DC books. And really like I know people always recommended that I read Saga. Like I heard Saga was one of those great indie books. The Walking Dead I get recommended a lot as well. I actually want to read the Walking Dead, I think 3000 or something like. It was like in the future where Rick Grimes has the fucking.
I think it was like I think that was a one shot.
Was it? It was a one shot.
I think so.
Shit.
I remember when I was like, oh.
Yeah, they had like the governor in the future and aliens, all this crazy shit like that. So yeah, I just want to, I like that's one thing I want to do this year for 2023. I want to definitely get into like some more non-Marvel, non-DC shit, and see how different that medium is through like a different lens and shit like that. That's not following like the same tropes as like Marvel and shit like that or DC and shit. So
yeah, because I feel like you'll have that kind of similar experience like the way you would, where it's like you watch MCU movies and they have their own kind of tone and aesthetic, and then you watch movies that are just movies, and then you're like, dang, that's a good movie, whether it's like Quentin Tarantino or Christopher Nolan or whoever, right? And you're like, dang, these are good movies, right? And you're like, I love the MCU. There's some cool stuff here. Then there's these movies that are also just as good that like I know the MCU is not gonna do. You know what I mean? So it's like you'll get that kind of experience. Yeah.
You know what's crazy? What? Crazy. So like growing up, I was like a super gigantic TMNT fan, like really really big TMNT fan. But I never got into the TMT books. I see you reviewing the I've been like looking for like certain books to get into because I know they got like the Mirage comic shit. You got like the IDW shit. But I started like buying like TMNT toys and shit like that, and I think like I read The Last Ronin. That was probably like the most recent non-Marvel, non-DC shit that I read, bro. Last Ronin, holy schmoly, bro. That might have been one of the best like post-apocalyptic books I've read in a minute, bro. It reminded me of like Old Man Logan a little bit, mixed with it like some 2099 Batman Beyond looking kind of vibes and shit like that. I thought that was dope, and the reason I brought that up is because I think they just revealed part 2, and they showed the 4 new turtles that were at the end of the Last Ronin book. So and
also there's a prequel book to the Last Ronin that's currently out right now.
Is it? Oh shit.
Yeah, there's a prequel book right now that it's almost ending, and it's showing you like what led to how Mikey got to where he's at in the Last Ronin book 1.
Copy.
And so.
To where he's like attacking like the building, like he's like doing the infiltration against Shredder and shit. Like,
yeah, and you get to see like how Mikey got to where he was at prior to the Last Ronin. Whatever. You get to see a little bit more of that, and then I'm excited for book 2 only because I'm like you got Kevin Eastman up in there, one of the co-creators of the Ninja Turtles.
Right.
And I think for me it's interesting. Like you could start with the Mirage stuff. Because it's like you could start with that.
You got a whole blank slate basically.
Yeah. But the IDW stuff, I think that stuff is. I think anyone can tell you like the IDW stuff is probably some of the best stuff to check out because everything up to date with the Last Ronin, like That's the continuity of Last Ronin.
Okay, yeah, because I know I see a lot of people often like argue that online. I said like, which universe does the Last Ronin take place in? Whether that's like Mirage, IDW, and shit like that. So IDW is looking like the one that leads into like the Last Ronin and shit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because there's certain characters in the IDW stuff, like what's her name? I think Janeka or something like that. I can't remember her name. Probably mispronounced the name, but you know, the 5th Ninja Turtle girl, and like, you know, there's certain things in Last Ronin where you're just like, oh hey, this acknowledges. But I think Last Ronin is so open enough that like, if you wanted to read the IDW stuff, you can.
Could take like certain things. And, like,
yeah, but you could pick and choose depending on the context of how you want to view it. Like if you're familiar with Ninja Turtles, you don't need to read the IDW stuff. You can just read that and you
and get in there. Yeah, because that's how I felt. Like I never read the IDW shit, but I like I said, I like one of my favorite games of all time was the TMNT games for the GameCube. It was like Battle Nexus. You had Mutant Mayhem. Yeah, all that crazy shit that was coming out. That was kind of like it was sort of like Shaolin Monks mixed with like Marvel Ultimate Alliance and shit like that.
Crazy you mentioned that.
You mentioned that. Talk on it. You talk on it. Yeah.
Battle Nexus 2 was Shaolin Monks.
Oh my god. Yeah, bro.
Literally. That game, nobody could make a mistake.
Literally.
You make a mistake, everybody's dead. Like,
you're done.
You want ultimate teamwork?
Yeah.
That's the game for that. That's the ultimate teamwork assignment.
Yeah,
that's
bro.
like if you hated teamwork in school.
Yeah.
Doing like team assignments, and you're like, dang, I know this person ain't gonna change nothing. That game was the example of, dang, I gotta work with this guy to beat this guy.
Yeah.
A rap for me, you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, and also, honorary mention, those games, I love those games.
Those games are beautiful, bro.
People say it, I think those are still one of the best Ninja Turtles games we ever got, aside from the classic arcade ones.
Yeah, Shredder's Revenge and shit like that, and all that, and Turtles in Time, all that shit. Yeah, that shit is fucking untouchable. But yeah, man, those early TMNT games, like that was like my era of TMNT, like the TM. It was just titled. Yeah, it was just the TMNT title cartoon where it was like the revival of the Turtles and shit. Where I think we were like probably like in 2nd or 3rd grade when that show started coming out. It was like 02, 03 maybe.
Yeah,
I remember
because I had the first game for Game Boy Advance, and then when Battle Nexus 2 came out, I still have.
Oh, matter of fact, yeah, I forgot those games were based on the show. The popularity of the show. Yeah.
And I think for me, that show was the closest to the comics.
Bro, like it captured, it captured the heart. Some episodes were serious. Some episodes were funny. They handled the Utroms and Krang and all that shit the right way. And you got Usagi or Jimbo and shit like that pulls up and like season 4 or some
in the
shit.
Battle Nexus tournament.
Yeah, bro. Come on, bro. I actually, it's funny because I was rewatching that shit. I'm telling you, bro. Like I don't know what made like I just got the itch for the Turtles and I went on like that crazy TMNT toy spree and shit like that. NECA does like a great Ninja Turtle line. And I started it with the Last Ronin toy. I got the Last Ronin toy first, and I always got recommended the Last Ronin since it's come out, like these last couple years and shit like that. And I just never got into reading it. And then I read it, and I think that's what it was. I read the Last Ronin, and it just got me back into like really appreciating what TMNT meant to me and shit like that as like a kid growing up. And I never realized like all the parallels with Daredevil, the foot, the hand, and all this funny shit. Yeah, like I don't know why I never clicked when I was younger, but that shit is fucking.
And I mean, it's funny because you read the first Ninja Turtles comic book, and you know, obviously they give a nod to Frank Miller and Jack Kirby,
right?
Because it's like you got the Fantastic Four and Daredevil parallels. It's like, you know, 4 turtles, 4 members, and then you got, like I said, the foot, the hand, all that stuff. But I think the Ninja Turtles, man, it's crazy. This goes back to the earlier conversation.
Oh, and then right? my fault. What also caught me off guard when they put me on with the split, with Splinter and Stick, like the names right there, Splinter and Stick. I'm like, oh, okay, duh. Fucking.
So the beautiful thing about this is this, right? Every generation has their generation of Ninja Turtle, and yet the Ninja Turtles still matter. No matter the generation.
Through each one. Yep.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with Power Rangers. And it's why like I have an appreciation for stuff like that in JoJo, where it's like, everybody has their own generational thing that's still that thing, but they have certain characters or certain versions of those characters they latch on to that's like, that's my version.
It speaks to them more.
Yeah, but it makes you appreciate it more because you're like, wow, look at how translatable these characters are. Like, it doesn't matter how much time passes. Like mythology itself, there's always going to be something for a generation to latch onto that kind of push things forward or whatever. And I think the Ninja Turtles is actually a really good example of like, wow, It doesn't matter what iteration. If you love the Ninja Turtles, you're gonna like whatever you're gonna get, and you'll appreciate the different versions because you're gonna be like, oh wow, like I see why this is appealing, or I see why this is this. This is my favorite, but I see why this is this.
Right.
You know what I mean? So yeah, it's Ninja Turtles is special, man.
Absolutely. All right, bro. So as we are coming to the end, hold on, let me let this train pass real quick. Train always wants to pull up. Then opportune
It never
times.
wants to pull when you want it to.
Yeah, right. But when I'm in the crib, it's there every fucking 5 minutes. That's the funny part. But yeah, now that we get towards the end of the interview and shit like that, and I just want to say thank you for for giving us your time and shit like that. You all are like definitely one of my inspirations as far as like my friend groups grow and shit like that. Like when I see you work, it makes me want to work and shit like that. And I love having people like that around me. And for those that don't know, Ant is one of those people that like he's always doing something like and. For some, I don't know why. I think he just likes me or some shit, but he always puts time aside for Between Villains and shit like that. So, Ant, love you for that, my brother. It was awesome talking to you, and we're gonna start going hard on the podcast shit again. So, we need you around for the Marvel talks and shit like that.
Yeah, no, me and Wes.
Bro. Yeah, exactly. We need the dynamic duo back. So, yeah, man, I'm gonna try to get Wes on episode 2 of Heroes and shit like that. But, this is the first episode of Heroes, so I appreciate you, for being the first guest on the show and shit like that. I want to have you on the show again, like when we get our striding and shit like that, and just like really find our footing and shit. But I'm happy we broke this ice and shit. And yeah, man, we talked about a lot of shit that we wanted to catch up on. And Ant is one of the coolest fucking people that I know. So Ant, where can people find you if they want to like find you on social media and shit like that?
Okay, so you can find me on AntDuar94 _ Paper Champs for my bass/band stuff. You can find for all my personal or fine art stuff, if you so choose to, it's just AntDuar94. Just for exclusively art stuff, AntDuar94 Comics. And then just for reviews, the Comic Surfer or Fanboy Factor, either or. I take like whatever I put on Fanboy Factor and I put it on the Comic Surfer for people who probably like, I don't want to click the link.
Click the link. So, yeah, I do that too with Between Villains. Like I'll post like a shorter, more simple video on my page for people that don't want to like, that's not really into all the extra, shenanigans.
I gotta say one more thing. So fun fact, right? I became pressed at Comic-Con last year, right?
Wow.
And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because something for you as you go forward with Between Villains is I've been writing comic book reviews for 7 years, right? So it's gonna be 8 after this year, like I mentioned before. And at the time, the only reason why I was writing comic reviews is because I remember I was a freshman in college, and I was at LaGuardia, obviously graduated from there, whatever. But I wasn't in art classes yet, and I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do with art or whatever per se. Like I just didn't really know because I didn't feel like there was anything there for me, right? But I was still doing art. And I was in an English 101 class where the professor, Dr. CJ Smith, shout out to you, he had everybody obviously make a blog, right? And, he made a blog and all this other stuff. And after the class was over, he said, yo, you can do whatever you want with that blog, right? Like, whatever you decide to do with it, you can either use it, not use it, whatever. And I remember I was like, man, I don't know what to do. And so I remember whenever I was kind of just interested in stuff and I knew nobody really cared for it, but I was like, I want to write something. I would just go on this blog using Blogspot. And then time went on, and then I remember I was on Facebook around 2016, and I was trying to look for other jobs because I was working like, parties and stuff like that for a little while. And I was just kind of like, man, I don't really want to keep doing this. And
right.
I was like interning at LaGuardia, but I was like, I wanted to just make side income. And I thought, oh, wow, make side income, like writing reviews, whatever, right? Tried applying for different like review pages or whatever and stuff like that, and publishers, and they didn't pick me up. And then someone put me on a Fanboy Factor and was like, hey, they're looking for writers. So I was showing examples of stuff that I'd written on think pieces on like Batman and X-Men and stuff. And, Brian and Isaac, took a chance with me and stuff like that. And I was just writing reviews because, I was getting stuff and being able to review stuff. And people think like money comes with this stuff. And, most often it doesn't, right? But I was still doing it because I love doing it, because when I didn't have time to make art, I had time to write. And the beautiful thing about phones is Google Docs, you just go on there.
Yep.
And that's that, right? And how I approach the way I approach essays is, right, you approach it as like, what's the synopsis of the essay? what's the core, and when I write reviews, I always put synopsis, writing/plot, art/verdict.
You make a skeleton? You make like a skeleton? I always do a skeleton before I get into writing. Because I got too much stuff going on in here, so I gotta like organize that shit and then fill it in.
Yeah, and the way I always approach stuff is like I get a review, like I get like whatever books I get to pick, like the list, pick whatever books, and then you have until whatever the release date of that book is, right? So I like to, if I get like say a solicitations Friday, then I try to make sure I get it done for Monday, right? And the reason why I bring this up is I was doing this for 7 years, 6 years roughly, and I remember at the time, you know, my editor Brian was always like, I'm gonna try to get you to Comic-Con, this and this, and I never was trying to go to Comic-Con and stuff like that. Like I've been to Comic-Con before, but like I wasn't trying to go there for the sake of press or nothing. Like I was just writing reviews. I didn't really have interest in doing that. And then it wasn't until like last year that like he put an application in, and then I ended up getting accepted. And I wasn't sure if it was because I'd been doing it for a long time, and I started like interviewing actual creators. Like I started reaching out to like writers within the field and publishers and all this other stuff. And I guess little by little it started to like trickle down, and that's how I became press for Comic-Con last year, and I'm apparently going to be press again this year. So what I'm trying to say is that it's going to be rough for a long period of time. You're not going to see money
ever
for a long period of time.
Man. You can't think about
that. Right, but that's why it's the beauty of working a job, right? Like you work the day job to fund the dream job, the dream career, right? And I think a lot of people, and I think a lot of kids get too wrapped up on overnight successes because they think what they see on social media, and that stuff isn't real. You know what I mean? That stuff's not real at all. Some people get it, but you gotta think, just because they got it so fast doesn't mean it's gonna last. You know what I mean? And so you gotta always remember that things take time, but if you stay consistent on something, you will eventually get there, right? It's just a matter of maintaining things just and enduring. So, you know, between villains, think about it. You've been doing this for some period of time now.
Yeah,
right?
probably like
now.
I want to say like 5, 6.
Yeah,
like 5, 6.
And, you know, and it's getting somewhere. You know what I'm saying? So,
yeah, we hit our stride now. I think we're almost at 1,300 followers on the gram, and I remember we might have been, bro, it's so crazy. We might have been stuck on like 250 followers for like probably like a year or two, bro. It was this period of time, like, damn, am I even fucking like making any differences on the gram? Like, am I like basically I would find myself questioning like, am I needed? Like, is what I'm doing needed by the people? You know what I mean? Do the people need me to do what I'm doing? Not need me personally, because but like need what need what I'm trying to provide and shit like that. And that's always how I try to approach like the Between Villains shit. I always try to like, because I could post news all day. I try not to overflood people's timelines. Like I try to like pick the shit that I know the villains are gonna be more receptive to, that they may want to know and shit like that. And it took a while for me to like really feel like I was making a difference on the gram, because like people could go to IGN, people could go to like GameSpot, fucking even Bleacher Report has their own gaming page now. Like that shit is, but there is something about like there's a reason why people always come back to Between Villains for like their news and shit like that. And yeah, maybe I didn't see it when we first started, but now it's like I have like a very specific voice that I've come to realize like my voice actually does matter in certain circles and shit like that. And I try to be like as responsible with that voice as possible, especially like even like as far as like in for instance, the Flash movie came out. I could have harped on the movie. I could have said the movie is fucking horrible because of it, but I chose to look at it as like a whole and really like break it down and shit and like really see it for what it was. And like I feel like I have a responsibility to like deliver news or reviews and shit like that a certain way. And people actually now 5 years into it, people actually do hit me up asking me for like my advice on like which video games I should get. What did I think about this movie? Or like, I'm not gonna see this movie until you see it and let me know how it is. Just like shit like that. Right. So I agree, man, and I feel like we still haven't even like scratched the surface of the shit I wanted. I haven't even done like an in-person event or I haven't done anything yet. I've just been taking my time and like just cooking up. I haven't dropped a t-shirt. I haven't done any merch. Like I'm just chilling right now. I just want to build this shit. And I guess when you are passionate about something, you don't really worry, like money should never, like that's how you know if you're passionate, is because like I haven't seen $1 off of Between Villains ever in my life. Like, you know, if anything, I've wasted, like, not wasted, but I've invested money into Between Villains. You know what I mean? So definitely money cannot be the first thing on your mind. That shit has to be the last. It will definitely happen one day. You know, you could just see the many examples, you know what I mean, in the world and shit like that. But definitely, long you stay consistent with something, and as long as you're passionate about it and your heart is in the right place, I think shit'll eventually fall into line, for sure.
Yeah. And I just want to say last thing, right? Everything you just said, the fact that like it's gotten to a point now where people contact me and say, "Yo, what did you think of this?" Or like, "Yo, I want to hear you talk about this," or this, and like, right, The Flash, was I fond of it? You know, like, I appreciate certain factors of it. I don't think it's a bad movie. I don't think it's a great movie neither. It's one of those things it's like, right? But you're speaking from a place that's authentic to you, right? Your opinion.
Right.
And like, and when you back it up with stuff that can make that opinion valid, right? It makes people say, "Hey, you know what? He's got a point."
He's got a point. Even if I don't agree with him, maybe, you know what I mean, it might force,
like, there's something to it.
Exactly, and it might help them think differently for the next movie that they watch and shit like that.
Right. And it allows them to start to think critically for themselves too. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, we don't gotta be like rocket scientists to allow people to hear what we think, what we like for us.
Right.
And if some people like that as a byproduct that's of similar opinion or not, you know what I mean? If it works for them, works for them. But the beauty of that is just that, you know, you started this thing and look at where it's gotten you so far, and the fact that, sure, it hasn't been $1 yet, but like everything you've been investing in, from doing the hustling of working a job and taking those contributions and taking a chunk of it, investing in that bit by bit, it's showing, you know what I'm saying? And you know, that's why I just want to leave people with this. You know, you got to remember, and also look, I got to say, you know, shout out to JJ and my cousin Edwin. You know what I mean? Because it's crazy their connections to you.
Yeah, and it's insane. For us. It's insane, bro. It's insane, bro.
And then knowing that, like, there's people in our circles that we actually coming to know that, like, we could have gone our whole lives not knowing each other, and somehow.
And that would have been a crime. That would have been a crime.
Yeah.
That would have been a
crime against the multiverse.
No, that would have. Yeah. Nah, Mobius would have came and checked us out real quick.
Oh yeah,
he would have came and checked us.
You know, but I just want to say, and I don't mean to hold it all up. It's just, like, this is the beauty of when you're doing things you love. It's not work. It's an actual career that becomes something. So give it like 3 more years. Give it 3 more years.
Absolutely,
we can see what becomes in Between Villains, man. I'm telling you, you know what I mean? So you're doing it. It's
crazy, bro. I appreciate it, bro. And yeah, man, that concludes episode 1 of Heroes. I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. Episode 2, we will try to like shoot next week and shit like that. I'm gonna try to have my boy Wes on here. If not, we will find another guest host and shit like that. But as always, thank you so much for popping out, bro. I will make sure to put your contact information in like the link in the bio and shit like that, and YouTube, the description, all that beautiful shit. So if you guys need to contact Ant, check down below in our description. As always, man, hit that like and subscribe button at Between Villains, BTWNVILLAINS on all social media platforms. And as always, guys, be safe, and until next time.